everyone. Going to start the May regularly scheduled meeting of the Lake County Sheriff Civilian Oversight Mission. And we have several important issues on the agenda, including the Department of Public Health's Office on Violence Prevention. And so I'd like to just dive in right away. Before I dive in, there's it's a message about from Eric. People want to give public comment.
Good morning and welcome. Public participation in our meeting is one of our goals, and we welcome your comments in person, through WebEx, by telephone, or in writing. There will be an opportunity for public comment on each item and at the end of the meeting during general public comment. For items on the agenda, Chair Kennedy will introduce them, presentations will be heard, the Commission will discuss the item, and then public comment will be taken. If you wish to speak in person, please fill out a public comment card and turn it in at the table with the public comment sign. If you are on WebEx, please raise your hand by selecting the hand symbol. And if you called in to listen to the meeting, please press *3 on your phone to activate the raise hand feature. We ask that all speakers ensure your comments abide by the meeting's code of conduct. All speakers will have 2 minutes unless the chair determines otherwise based on the number of speakers signed up for each item. We will make a similar announcement in Spanish, and following the Spanish announcement, I will take roll.
Buenos días y bienvenidos. La participación pública en nuestras reuniones es uno de nuestros objetivos principales y agradecemos sus comentarios en persona y a través de WebEx, por teléfono o por escrito. Habrá una oportunidad para comentarios públicos sobre cada tema de la agenda y al final durante los comentarios generales. Para los temas de la agenda, el Chair Kennedy presentará el tema. Se escucharán las presentaciones. Los miembros de la comisión discutirá el tema y después se tomarán los comentarios del. Si desea comentar en persona, complete una tarjeta de comentarios y entréguesela a un miembro personal en la mesa asignada con el cartel de comentario público. Si está participando por WebEx, levante la mano y seleccione la imagen de la mano levantada si quiere comentar. Si llamó para escuchar la reunión, presione la estrella y el número 3 en su teléfono para activar la función de la tecla de la mano levantada. Pedimos a todos los participantes que van a comentar que sus comentarios cumplan con el código de conducta de la comisión. Todos los participantes que van a dar un comentario tendrán 2 minutos para comentar, a menos que el Chair Kennedy determine que lo contrario en el tiempo asignado. Gracias.
Chair Kennedy, I'll take the roll now.
Thank you.
Chair Kennedy.
Here.
Vice Chair Jermon R. Hicks.
Present.
Commissioner Robert Bonner. Commissioner Irma Higgins Cooper. Commissioner Luis S. Garcia. Commissioner Patricia Giggins. Commissioner James P. Harris.
Here.
Commissioner Hans Johnson. Commissioner Leo Rubin. Chair Kennedy, we have a quorum, and I'll turn the meeting back over to you.
Thank you. The first, we just have some housekeeping. So on the consent calendar, we have approval of the April 20 prior meeting minutes. Approve it. Next, we usually begin family impact remarks, but I'm told that we didn't get any request impacted family members. So I think we can just on to item number 2. Item number 2 is a letter I wrote to the sheriff regarding a fatal shooting. The DA, it's Andre Guardado. And the DA recently declined to prosecute and issued a memo. So I'll just try to frame the issue and then we'll have a discussion. On June 18th, Deputy Miguel Vega shot Andres Guardado in the back 5 times, killing him. Vega and his partner, Deputy Christopher Hernandez, claimed that Andre was reaching for a gun. A community member who presented as an eyewitness disputed that Andre was reaching for a gun, and a gun was found approximately 5 feet from his body, which was lying face down on the ground. The shooting, of course, prompted several large protests throughout Los Angeles, one which ended with the LASD deputies using gas on protesters after they refused to disperse. The press reported that deputies Vega and Hernandez were affiliated with a deputy gang. Particular concern, we now know Deputy Vega and Deputy Hernandez have both been indicted by the U.S. Attorney for the Central District of California, Los Angeles, for allegedly abducting a young Latino man, threatening him, and making false reports that he was high on methamphetamine in order to cover up their crimes. The investigation of the fatal shooting of Andre Guardado was conducted by 2 experienced LASD detectives, Mike Davis and Joe Valencia, and at a public coroner's inquest, which is a proceeding authorized by California law, both detectives refused to answer questions about their investigation, asserting their Fifth Amendment privilege not to incriminate themselves. Davis and Valencia persisted in asserting the Fifth, even after retired justice conducting the inquest questioned why 2 detectives investigating a deputy-involved shooting would have any reason to assert the Fifth Amendment. This is truly startling conduct by 2 members of the department entrusted with the solemn responsibility of investigating the shooting of an 18-year-old man. Despite this scenario, the DA has declined to prosecute, which is their right. The memo that they put out explaining the declination acknowledges allegations that Vega and Hernandez have been accused by other deputies of being deputy gang members, but the memo does not state what, if anything, was done to investigate that allegation. Did the Sheriff's Department investigate these 2 deputies' connections to the executioners or any other gang? We don't know. I'm hoping that the sheriff or his representative can clear that up for us today. Also, why were Detectives Mike Davis and Joe Valencia allowed to remain on the investigation after they asserted the Fifth Amendment when asked about how they conducted the investigation? There were allegations in the press that deputies destroyed video evidence that might have contradicted their claim. I understand from the DA's memo that those allegations may be untrue, but the fact remains that these 2 detectives asserted the Fifth Amendment without any explanation, that a retired justice of the Court of Appeal questioned that invocation, yet nothing was done to remove them from the investigation. My question is, how can this commission, and more importantly, public, have any confidence in the sheriff's department's investigation and conclusions in light of this assertion? So there's also a letter I submitted to the sheriff on 10th, and I don't see Sheriff Luna here right now. I believe it was a press conference. Someone from the department is prepared to address that.
Assistant Sheriff Holly Francisco over countywide operations.
Thank you. Thank you for being.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys giving us the opportunity to explain a little bit what happened during the process. And I could tell you Sheriff Luna, as well as our department, shares the same concerns of investigators taking the fifth during criminal investigation, more importantly, during a deputy-involved shooting investigation. I can tell you I've reviewed all the documentation relating to the inquest, and a little background, the coroner's office had not conducted an inquiry in over 30 years. So nobody really knew, all of our departments didn't know what the process was going to be. Our department requested side counsel from county counsel. They obviously were the interviewers during the inquest, and it was county counsel's opinion at the time that this is a non-adversarial hearing. So those investigators retained private counsel. One of the things I'd like to add is that those investigators turned over all reports and information confidentially to the justice officer. And at the advice of their counsel, right or wrong, they did invoke the fifth. The hearing officer was able to make her determination based on the evidence provided and did not re-interview or try to gain more information from those investigators. I also want to say that this was the first of 5 inquests. And after this inquest and seeing the advice that was given to these investigators, county counsel reached out to our department and advised us what to do, how the investigators were able to provide limited information, and when it came down to the actual investigation, that they would insert the government code 1040 instead of invoking the fifth. So learning lesson for our department, county counsel was great with us through those next 4 inquests, and they went on with no issues that arose. I attended 3 of the 5 inquests. Once the government code was inserted, issues. So I can't speak as to why counsel gave the investigators the advice of taking the fifth, but I could say if they would have did what the other investigators did, which was provide a brief overview, responding there and handling the investigation and experience and training, and then government code 1040, as well as providing the information to the hearing officer, don't think that would have been an issue in this case. These investigators from the get-go met and briefed the FBI regarding everything related to this case. I also want to talk about, layers of approval. Once these investigators are done with their investigation, they turn the complete investigation over to a homicide lieutenant and the homicide captain for their approval to make sure that the investigation is thorough and complete. They did that on this case. Remember, homicide investigators are merely the fact finders in the case. All that information is presented to the district attorney's office, JSID, to determine if the deputy's actions were lawful. They did turn that case over to the district attorney on December 19th, 2020. And the DA's office also has the ability to ask investigators for further follow-up. And I was told in this case, no further follow-up was needed, that the investigation was complete. I can tell you though, after reviewing all this, the sheriff's department does see the concern in the taking of the fifth, and one of the things that we're doing, Detective Division is in the process of creating a Detective Division order for all detectives. It gives an explanation of taking the fifth, the implications of that, the explanations of Government Code 1040, 1041, and 1042, and also moving forward, if investigators feel the need to take the fifth on any investigation, those investigators will be removed from the case and new investigators will be assigned the case. I can also assure you that from the homicide investigator all the way up the chain of command to the sheriff, we all understand, have the knowledge of taking the fifth and the government code insertion. I don't think this will be an issue in the future. But if it does, it will be addressed immediately. So you asked what the sheriff's department is doing also regarding the deputy gang question regarding these deputies. So once we get the letter of opinion from the DA's office, there's a shooting review from Internal Affairs Bureau. And basically they present all those facts to the Executive Force Review Committee, and they will determine if force tactics were in policy regarding this incident.
Are you done?
Yes, thank you for giving me that time.
No, I appreciate you addressing the difficult question. I have been a criminal, but I've never had an investigating officer hire a private to testify. I mean, they hire it for pitches motions, but why do two detectives being asked questions by justice of the pursuant to a coroner's inquest feel they hire private lawyers and assert the Fifth Amendment, which, if validly asserted, means they fear incriminating themselves information that would subject them to criminal prosecution?
Can't answer that question specifically, but what I can tell you is by having county counsel assist all the other investigators on what they can speak to and when to insert that government code, greatly assisted all the other inquest and investigators in knowing the legal ramifications or justification of how to proceed.
I want to start by saying I greatly appreciate the change in administration that has happened since the most recent election. And as an Inspector General now have access to a wide array of documents of the Sheriff's Department. We have an open dialogue with the Sheriff's Department's management, which I actually bear great fruit in our investigations into gang misconduct and into failures in the Sheriff's Department to supervise and discipline its own staff. It's often been said that an agency can't be allowed to investigate itself and be expected to do it fairly and properly. I think that criticism is true. I don't blame individuals. Sheriff Luna, I don't think he's disingenuous in his representations to the public. I know staff that he's hired. I know staff that he's given fresh orders to since being left, and I greatly appreciate that. I like not being the target of a criminal investigation by the Sheriff's Department. I don't like still being the target of an investigation by the Attorney General. I trust that investigation much more. So I am grateful for the change. Having said that, what you just heard is not entirely, I think, a fair assessment of what happened there. I heard repeatedly that there was this first inquest and then there were 5 more and everything went smoothly. You heard that the detectives briefed the FBI on a regular basis. What you didn't hear, and my concern is the Sheriff's Department always does this, they tell the story, not the full story, and that's not what oversight is about. At that same time, they were refusing to comply with their legal duties Oversight to cooperate with us. The allegations regarding the access to video evidence, it was alleged that detectives went out and tampered with video cameras. Okay, so the DA's office thought that was just fine. Great. But what they could have done is had monitoring by us, and they chose not to. We were contacted by private citizens who were so concerned about the process that they wanted to provide us with the same evidence the sheriff's department. So we were able to monitor that one slice of video evidence and make sure that it wasn't altered in any way because of the intervention of private citizens, not because of any action by the government. The inquests were undertaken by the county because the sheriff had unlawfully, the sheriff's department, many people under the orders of the sheriff had unlawfully refused to permit oversight of their investigation, and that was ongoing during this process. So when it's said that everything went smoothly, that is not the case. As to the video evidence, some of it was collected in a manner which we will never know. Destruction of evidence. It's impossible to know. So no document from the sheriff or otherwise, or for the DA should ever convince this body that that was handled properly.
Is that why they're asserting the fifth?
Well, let's get on to the fifth assertment. As you know, being a practitioner of criminal law, it is unheard of for investigators to assert the fifth. It's unheard of, and I mean that literally. The Attorney General began a civil rights investigation of the Sheriff's Department, which continues to this day right after that assertion. Disclosing any confidential communications or second-guessing anyone, I don't think that's a coincidence. So it's unheard of. And as you pointed out, it has a very specific legal factual basis. You can't assert the fifth just because you want oversight. That's exactly what happened. And more importantly, one thing we just heard that was very important was that the Sheriff's Department now has a policy in place to, if somebody asserts the fifth, to remove them as the investigator on a case. But that's obvious. and it wasn't done at the time, not through error, not through omission. It was done through an organized effort to obstruct justice during the Guardado investigation. Not the same administration, but many of the same people, because the Sheriff's Department has changed the person at the top, not the people in. So I want to commend this body for asking the question you did. Before you did that, I never heard anything about the policy that we've now raised this repeatedly for years. So I appreciate that question, and I don't think it's just an inside baseball question. I think it's a critical element of the Sheriff's Department doing the best it can investigate itself. As I say, I think that's a bit of a fool's errand because it's impossible for anybody to investigate themselves. You just can't do it. But I appreciate that they're trying as best they can and they have policies in place. I can tell you that I have current investigations going right now. I'm sure we'll talk about before the end of this meeting a little bit about the gang investigation. But I have current investigations in which there is substantial evidence of the Sheriff's Department, again, not properly conducting internal investigations under the prior administration and the current administration. So this problem is live. This problem isn't an individual instance. It's not about two homicide detectives who decided to take the advice of their lawyers. It's about the appropriate procedures in place by the Sheriff's Department and the District Attorney to see that matters of great public interest, because they involve our lives, are handled properly. In this case, the Sheriff's Department did not do that. The DA did not do that. And under fresh eyes, a new sheriff, they didn't correct the problem. As you point out, there were allegations of gang involvement in this case. They were never investigated. I mean, there's no documentation that they were investigated, but I'm not aware of it happening. I wouldn't be conducting the investigation I am now if it had been investigated. And so I'm pretty sure it wasn't. That's
Can we
not
ask?
acceptable. We can ask, but you already asked and you didn't get an answer, did you?
It did?
I can answer. So now that the Internal Affairs Bureau will be conducting the shooting review, that would be a question asked to the deputies involved in the case, since there's that allegation.
Sure.
With all due respect, that is not how you investigate a serious allegation. Don't go to the person who is alleged to have committed a serious criminal act or other act and ask them if they did. You investigate thoroughly and completely. Every internal affairs investigation the sheriff has ever conducted of gangs, they have failed to identify the members of the alleged gangs, find out exactly how they operate and who are members of them and what they've done so in order to get third-party witnesses about the conduct. That should have been done as part of the criminal investigation, not as an IA follow-up after the fact, and it shouldn't begin by placing all your cards on the table. That's consistent with the same conduct I've seen in other internal investigations, both criminal and what should be disciplinary investigations. For instance, last year, after I reported the apparent infiltration of outside the Sheriff's Department into the Sheriff's Department, militia groups that have been accused of insurrection, I brought that to the attention of the Sheriff's Department last year. After that, what I call a wanted poster appeared in East LA of me with my picture, a picture of a gun, and the quote, "A man's got to do what a man's got to do," floated in Gang Central. That was in the Detective Bureau for all to see. I brought it to the Sheriff's Department's attention, or my staff did. So far, the amount of internal affairs investigation conducted on that is 0. And it's been 6 months. Also, the captain of that station was allowed to remain in place without questions, without, as far as I can tell, any kind of action to take care of that problem. And as you all know, because you read about it in the Times, after that fact, this year, under this administration, somebody inside the department accused that person of racism, essentially. No response. Again, no response, no movement, no action until it was in the front page of the paper. That is the way the Sheriff's Department currently conducts its internal affairs investigations. It is unacceptable. It is not an improvement from the days when we had a sheriff who was literally, or almost figuratively, but almost literally gunning for people. Now we have a person in charge who I believe is honest and sincere in his effort to make change. The orders are different, but the organization has not had a sea change in its culture. It won't until the policy that we've now heard articulated, which I appreciate that policy, is actually implemented. That concept, which is we need full and thorough and fair internal investigations, is really in the Sheriff's Department. When that happens, many years from now, we'll have a different Sheriff's Department, but we're not there yet. Thank you for the time.
So many questions. Commissioners.
It's not on. I guess I'm just not speaking into it. As important as investigation and looking into and getting answers on the investigation of the Andres Guardado's killing by the Sheriff's Department. Back. And want to ask questions as to whether or not deputy sheriffs that were involved in that shooting were members, are aspiring to be members of the gang. That's fine, but I just want to point out to both the sheriff, who's not here, and to this commission, that currently there is no policy of the Sheriff's Department that prohibits participating or joining deputy gangs. There is none. You can investigate it. There's a state law, but it hasn't been implemented by the Sheriff's Department as a matter of policy. You cannot discipline under that state law. You need a policy of the Sheriff's Department that says this is prohibited conduct. Because right now you can find out that one or more of the people that shot, and I don't know, I don't want to presume anything here. I don't know if they were deputy gang members. I don't know if they were deputies who wanted to be deputy gang members and therefore were trying to show their hubris. I don't know. I think it would be good to know, but I'm saying when we do know, they cannot be disciplined for that because there is no policy of the Sheriff's Department that prohibits joining and participating in deputy gangs. So that's the main point I want to make at this meeting. I want to make it loud and clear. The reason I want to make it loud and clear, and I am speaking to, thank you, Assistant Sheriff Francisco, for being here, but I want this to go directly to the sheriff. This commission on March 3rd of this year adopted a series of recommendations that were put forward by the special counsel of this commission. And those recommendations, A2 and A3, require or recommended strongly to the sheriff that he promptly implement policies that prohibited deputies from participating and joining deputy cliques and deputy gangs. We included deputy cliques because every deputy clique that we know of has led to a deputy gang, like the executioners and the banditos, and we specifically named those in the policy. So I'm just saying, look, I think we've been patient. Sheriff Luna, I want to be patient, but our patience is wearing thin. If nothing else, I would like to have Sheriff Luna appear before our next meeting. Answer to this commission why he has not adopted particularly recommendations A2 and A3, which prohibit joining and participating in deputy gangs. And frankly, leaving aside the one that's caused some controversy, which is a recommendation of 5-year rotation, leave that one aside. Doesn't have to act on that right. Probably warrants some further study. But there's no reason why he shouldn't be adopting all the other 26 recommendations. And when I say that, when we recommended those recommendations to the sheriff that they be adopted, we did it because we believe they're not only designed to, but if he implements them and enforces them, they will rid the department of deputy cliques and deputy gangs going forward. So we ought to be looking forward to ending deputy cliques and deputy gangs within the department. So I would urge the sheriff to do that, actually, before our next meeting. I'd certainly want to hear further delay. Frankly, I do not understand it, particularly if the sheriff said that he wants to hold people accountable. The only way to hold them accountable, hold deputies accountable for participating or joining deputy cliques, deputy gangs, is to have a policy rule of the department that prohibits that conduct. Let's get on with it.
My one response is Ms. Eileen Decker from the Office of Constitutional Policing is working on those recommendations. I can assure you. She will be here shortly.
It would be great if she were here too with the sheriff.
She's actually on a conference call, but she will be here.
Yeah, but in any event, look, we would hope that the message is clear. We want certainly those 2 recommendations adopted without see all of them, even aside the rotation issue. Some of the contract cities have raised an issue with respect to that. It's not one of the most important of them. Thank you.
Investigation into prior issues involving Deputy Vega for other of excessive force and or dishonesty when it comes to preparing reports. Because it's my understanding they have at least 2 that Chair Kennedy identified in his letter, but other allegations of excessive force as well. So has that been investigated?
I don't have that answer, but we can get that.
Hello? Okay, thanks. I might have missed this, but what is Code 1040, Government Code 1040? Is that something that allows investigators to not answer, but that's legal? The 5th is not? Pleading the 5th is not, but that would be, what
I could
what
read
does
you
that
the
mean?
definition, but basically protects the investigation while it's still active and ongoing.
So does that mean that they don't have to answer questions because of investigation, which we hear all the time? Nobody can say anything because there's an ongoing investigation.
Correct.
Is that what that means?
Correct. And this was to determine cause and manner of. So again, they provided all the documentation to the hearing officer confidentially. Interfere with the investigation is an assertion that is allowed.
So my other question is, and maybe you may know this, Mr. Huntsman, you may know this, Sean, you may know this. How does an investigation like this, even though it supposedly was reviewed and everything seems to have been said, yes, it's fine, including the DA who refused to go further. With the public and our concern, how does something like that get opened?
To answer that question, murder has no statute of limitations, so it can be reopened at any time. The Sheriff's Department could today conduct additional investigation. They could conduct the gang-related investigation in the criminal case and submit it to the DA. Could do a number of things. I think some things would be pointless because evidence has already been handed. But there are things they could do and should, as I said, across the board, the gang investigation that should be happening could be happening in IA cases, criminal cases, but has been not done. The district attorney likewise has the same authority. They have independent authority. As Chair Kennedy has pointed out, this was a DA decision not to ask for additional investigation. The Sheriff's Department's pointed that out. That's not a plus. They have the ability to conduct grand jury investigation. They have the ability to request additional investigation with the Sheriff's Department, and they have the ability to file charges 30 years from now, if appropriate. I'm not saying that would be appropriate in this case, but the legal authority is there. And then the second point, a legal question was asked about 1040. 1040 is the official information privilege. Again, this assertion was made during a campaign by the Sheriff's Department to suppress oversight. You personally are aware of part of that campaign. Other members of this body are aware of it. It was part and parcel of an organized effort to prevent oversight of the Sheriff's Department. So yes, 1040 was a dodge that could be used more effectively than force Fifth Amendment assertion, which was unlawful, I believe, in this context. But it wasn't any more appropriate, and in fact, 1040 has a provision regarding interests of justice. The only reason there was a public inquest is because the Sheriff's Department refused to cooperate in the confidential oversight process that now the Sheriff has ordered be participated in. So in fact, had the wheels of justice been grinding appropriately, no 1040 objection would have been upheld. The Sheriff's Department says, we refuse to allow you to conduct confidential oversight under the law, and therefore we still want to keep our secrets from the public and the courts should have said no. We agree it's good for investigations to be conducted confidentially when they're done in a trustworthy manner. But when they're done in an untrustworthy manner, then the light of day must be shown upon them. Otherwise, the public can't have any confidence in them. And that's exactly what happened here over and over at the Sheriff's Department. And as you're hearing, although the sheriff has changed, the Sheriff's Department has not changed and maintains its position that everything's fine, nothing to see here, move along, don't ask us these questions. So I don't believe the 1040, the official information privilege, would have been properly invoked in that situation either.
I mean, Rob, I understand it's understand your comment. We're looking at this, but looking at a broader issue, shoots and kills a member of an act of consequence that all of us should care about. And Guardado was an 18-year-old man. He and his family and all of us deserve an investigation that is professional, that is trustworthy, that is objective, that has integrity. And I just cannot believe that we have settled the lawsuit for $8 million. We have declined to prosecute the officers, the deputies who are being prosecuted in federal court for violating the civil rights of other people, declined to prosecute, and we still don't have an answer. Are Deputy Vega and Deputy Hernandez members of the executioners. It's important because as the DA concedes, allegations that Vega was seeking to be executioners are concerning and arguably provide a motive is unreasonable force. Yet we've made the decision not to prosecute without investigating that. And I tried to do a Public Records Act myself regarding the deputies and the 2 detectives, and the Sheriff's Department told me that it was busy and that they wanted to answer it in a time. And I feel like I don't have any confidence that this investigation was done in a professional manner, a trustworthy manner, objective manner, or with integrity. And the DA, suspect, based on my numerous conversations with them, will tell me that they rely on the sheriffs to give them the information to make the decision, and that the sheriffs refuse to ask if people are belonging to the deputy gang. Is that true?
To ask,
When you're investigating a shooting, that you won't, that the investigators, the homicide detectives won't ask that question.
I know that it was not asked in this
Do
investigation.
you know why? It's so
So
important. That's,
yeah.
they've said it's like the motive.
at the timeline, and I don't know all the facts of the previous case, but allegations came out, this was submitted to the DA. But again,
Trying to suggest it, but you're suggesting I don't care about. Make the investigation, trying to think of the right word for it, adequate, and it's really understating it. Of course, there should have been questions about the gang participation or membership because it would have had to motive. What I'm trying to say is not that we shouldn't press on that issue, we should. Trying to say, though, we want to do something going forward here, we need to get our recommendations adopted. That's my only point. That is so much more important because I'm thinking of future lives not being wasted. Okay, so just I just want to correct the record. And I know you didn't mean it, but it certainly struck me that way, that somehow I don't care about Andres Guardado. I do care about him and his family. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob.
Sean,
Patty?
In a just universe, accountability should not have a time limit. It shouldn't lapse. And so in this situation, I mean, like, it's like everything's lined up to, and that's really hard to digest. I don't know how it's possible, but to really,
I think they need
This
to
situation.
reopen this investigation and
think
ask the question.
yeah, this is of great concern. Moving forward, looking backward is to help us move. So we have 4 years of a resistance to oversight from this body, supervisors, Mr. Huntsman's department. So 4 years. And this was part of that 4-year. So I think, I mean, maybe there are all these legal reasons why you can't do it, and I feel like find a way to take a look at this. I think it's extremely important, if it's possible, to correct the past, or at least get a conclusion that we can have confidence. There is not confidence because of everything that we've discussed.
this comment is that, just remember, there's still an investigation department that we start once the letter of opinion is given from.
sorry to interrupt, but let's be clear. You were told about that. You were told that the first thing it will do is begin with a statement from the person involved. As we all know, those of us who are criminal practitioners know, that immediately triggers Lybarger, Garrity, all the provisions of immunity. The person making a compelled statement can now not be prosecuted based on that evidence. If 10 years from now, or 3 years from now, DA or independent investigation by the feds that results in a prosecution generates evidence directly relevant to this potential murder case, the prosecutor in that case now will have to present affirmatively evidence in court that nothing they gathered was the fruits of that compelled investigation. So no practitioner of criminal law would ever consider an internal investigation beginning with a compelled statement to be an appropriate response to an insufficient criminal investigation when the statute of limitations has not run. So yes, something's happening, but it is another miscarriage of justice. That's why I agree completely with what Judge Bonner has said, that we need correct policies properly in place to prevent future tragedies. But what I'm telling you is the report that we made about the shortcomings of the disciplinary system and internal investigation system, I think it was in 2020, we had a detailed report about that none of the recommendations have been adopted. That's live. That's what's happening now. There are internal investigations being conducted right now in ways that if I could discuss them publicly would cause everybody's eyes to bug out. None of us would have confidence in what's happening in the Sheriff's Department. So that example of how the Sheriff's Department is going to begin compelling a statement now, failed criminal investigations, is an example of what is horribly wrong with the Sheriff's Department to this day. Again, no aspersions upon the management who I believe have the best intentions. Eileen Decker, I have great respect for, but the idea of giving to her the responsibility to generate a policy that was by law required to be in place a year and a half ago, when she has no staff, she's been asked for staff, and the county way is to take a long time to hire the people, so someday she'll have them, but the Sheriff's Department could give her staff, they could give her a group of people to work for now from their multi-billion-dollar budget, and they haven't. In the same way that, Sean, your PRA request isn't responded to because the PRA staff is tiny. It's incompetence by design. So I think Judge Bonner's point is absolutely correct. If this much time goes by and you don't implement the policy that the law requires, how can we expect to move forward?
Given the gravity of objections here and the power of discussion that it has elicited, and the 3-year anniversary of the Andres Guardado killing, which is coming up in the advent of our next month's meeting, could we revisit this issue at our June meeting and assess if there has been any response to Chair Kennedy's letter, to take further action on this in urging possible reconsideration or reopening of a full-fledged investigation about this case. I don't want people to come before the commission or to have issues come up and believe that they can be talked into the ground or kicked up the road. We have to show that we are showing enduring interest to this, as this letter reflects. I think the soul of oversight and accountability that Commissioner Giggins speaks to, and that is very well articulated in this powerful letter, shining a light on all of the injustices and the trammeling of honesty going on in this case and its aftermath, requires us to provide some diligence and continuity of oversight. I would urge that we reconsider this for possible further action and recommendations by this commission June meeting.
Okay, I think that's a suggestion because the sanctity of human life and I think concerning inquiry into deputy-involved shootings. And when I read DA's memo, which was based on, by their mission, work product and conclusions of two detectives who asserted the Fifth Amendment about their investigation, I don't have that. So I guess we'll defer this to our next meeting. I'm sorry that the sheriff isn't here. Holly, I appreciate that you are here and providing whatever answers that you can. But for the life of me, I don't know why the district attorney would make a decision this magnitude not to prosecute for anything without the answer. Is Miguel Vega a member of a deputy gang? Is he trying to become a member of the executioners when he shot Andres Guardado? To our next agenda item, which is our executive director.
Thank you, Sean. I'd like to tell you about some of our recent community engagement events. On May 4th, the commission hosted a conference on LASD jails titled Life Inside a 6x8 Cell. The event was attended by more than 100 people watching live. If you missed it, you can look at the recording on our YouTube channel at LA County COC. Commissioner Garcia moderated, and we had several panelists share their perspectives. We heard about living conditions in the jails from the ACLU Senior Staff Attorney Melissa Camacho, Dignity Empower Now's Co-Executive Director Mark Anthony Clayton Johnson, LA County Office of Inspector General's Chief Deputy Dara Williams and their investigator Andre Hamagian, and the Assistant Sheriff Sergio Aloma. This was a first in a series of our virtual conferences on LASD jails. Sessions 2 through 4 will be on May 22nd, May 31st, and June 12th. And you could find all those upcoming dates on our website at coc.lacounty.gov. Last Saturday, we held a community event in Palmdale. It was also very well attended, and concerns were addressed from school resource deputies to over-policing to deputy gangs and the implementation of the Antelope Valley Settlement Agreement. Our upcoming community engagement events will be at Dollar High Community Center for our June meeting in Compton. And we will also have a town hall on Saturday, June 24th at 10 a.m. at the Florence Library. I also just want to note that we don't have Commissioner Rubin here, but our long-term Commissioner, Leo Rubin, will be resigning from the commission effective June 1st. Leo was an appointed community commissioner since the commission's inception and served as the chair from 2020 to 2021 and the vice chair from 2019 to 2020. She has been instrumental in policy recommendations by serving on ad hoc committees for COVID-19 in the jails, immigration, bail reform, the Prison Rape Elimination Act, and most notably on the Deputy Gangs Ad Hoc Committee. Her service and dedication to the commission and residents of Los Angeles County and her contributions have been immeasurable. So we thank Leo for her service. She will be greatly missed, and we wish her well. We will have the process of selecting a new commissioner on our website, so you'll be able to go to coc.lacounty.gov for more information on that. Thank you, Chair Kim.
Loss of it's huge for this commission, so I appreciate you. We next have the Inspector General's report. Max, some information, but you may have more you want to report.
Yes, thank you. I won't talk about, well, as I mentioned, I'm conducting internal investigations regarding the internal operations of the Sheriff's Department regarding retaliation against whistleblowers and failure to act upon evidence presented to them regarding such conduct. And that's related to our gang investigation, but confidentiality rules prevent me from detail beyond to say that I'm concerned. But what I do want to talk about is law enforcement gangs. I'll give you a slightly long-winded historical version because I believe we may be on the verge of a historical moment. So I want to make sure the record of all that has gone before is a little bit clear. Some 10 years ago, I started as the Inspector General, and early on, we discussed with the department the problem of law enforcement gangs. It wasn't something we realized in a vacuum. It has been a problem for 50 years, and that's the reason it's such a severe problem, is it's been publicly known for such a long time, and yet willfully not dealt with by the Sheriff's Department, despite repeated requests by the public, by a federal judge, by a whole series of outside entities asking the department to deal with the problem. And I became one of those people after a while. And as you know, at that time, the law didn't allow us to do anything directly. This body, upon the urging of members of the public, took extraordinary action during the Villanueva administration to investigate as best it could with the tools available law enforcement gang conduct. And you did an amazing job with the help of professionals who you got to be involved, and I greatly appreciated that. That's kind of what that inquest was meant to be, but it didn't become that for reasons I think you've just established. But you did it anyway and succeeded in bringing to the public the facts that support additional investigation. The Sheriff's Department did not respond. It didn't respond under the previous administration, and to this day, in internal investigations and criminal investigations, as we just heard, there is a lack of investigation into the gang problem, which is a cancer, as it's been described. The cancer isn't that there are a bunch of street gang type people running around engaging in street gang conduct. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but the cancer hits long before that with the secrecy and the racial stratification, gender stratification apparently of these groups, and their impact upon the internal discipline process of the Sheriff's Department. The questions that any investigator would begin any investigation today with in the Sheriff's Department are not asked. And yes, it's true that some allegations aren't always present up front, but you know what? They hit every single case over and over. So if you're an investigator trying to get a complete record, you're going to want to ask those questions up front, but nobody does. So the law has changed thanks to your work in publicizing. I like to take a little bit of credit by being a punching bag for Villanueva. The legislature stepped in and changed some of the laws. And now we have some powers, and I'm exercising them. I've sent letters to 35 deputies asking them to come in and provide concrete evidence regarding their possible affiliation with groups and the membership of these groups in general, all the people. Ultimately, what we'll do is make a list of all the members of each of the groups so that we can assess what Judge Bonner was alluding to, which is when does a group turn into a gang, when does it not, who's involved in that, and which of the criteria under the penal code are met. This is something the Sheriff's Department should have done long ago, should be doing now, and isn't, and which we will now proceed with. The good news is we've collaborated with County Council on this effort, collaborated with the Sheriff's Department on this effort. We've given notice to the unions. So far, I'm impressed by the sea change, at least at the top level, of willingness to cooperate in this process. I wish it wasn't us doing it, but at least we're getting cooperation in that regard. So that's what we've begun. These letters, we put up on our website the letter so anybody can see it. It's been reported in the press. You all have, gave to your executive director and your chair a copy of it so you can get it. But if you want to break it down, you'll see that there's a process in place to protect the rights of individuals. We're not looking to violate anybody's rights or cause anybody not to be able to do their job. Quite the opposite. Trying to protect the rights of citizens and deputies who don't want this improper secrecy, veil, and shadow government to fall over the whole Sheriff's Department. So we come forward. If they want to assert the Fifth Amendment, as we just discussed, right, in the case of investigators in a homicide case, why would they assert the Fifth Amendment? But if you're asking about what could be gang activity, I can see why somebody might want to assert the Fifth. That's their choice. Not comfortable with what their answers will be, but if they believe they might incriminate themselves, they are fully entitled to assert the Fifth, and then there's a whole process to decide whether or not to compel. We'll consult with the DA and the sheriff and make sure we're not interfering with criminal investigations, such as the one we just discussed, which hypothetically could be going on. It could be done in moments if the Sheriff's Department moves forward with an IA case, But if the DA or the sheriff wants to keep some of those live, we'll be very careful not to interfere with that, because the public has a right to have its full range of laws applied equally to all. And the idea of the sheriff's department is above this, is anathema to our criminal justice system. So we'll work to make sure that doesn't happen, but we will work tirelessly, and we will give up. Although I hope to become irrelevant. I hope that the sheriff's department steps up and does this for me. I hope that this body continues to be involved, and as you were just hearing, the idea that you need to hit your issues and stick with them. So I appreciate the support that you've given me, you collectively. I'm hoping that what we're doing now will eventually bring the light to these organizations, take away the secrecy, take away to operate in the shadows, and get us to where we need to be. And I concur with Judge Bonner's point regarding the recommendations of this body, that not only should a policy be put in place consistent with the law, bare legal minimum, which LA County has been violating for, I guess it's a year and a half now, but goes beyond that and actually takes an affirmative effort to help deputies not get in that situation. You could make it so that a deputy doesn't have to worry about the pressure in a station about putting a Nazi helmet on their ankle without having to ask the question of whether or not you're in violation of the penal code for doing it. You could just say, don't do it. I mean, you know, the details may take some working out. I don't disagree. Just like, as was pointed out, the rotation concept is a detail that needs to be worked out in the larger context. But could the sheriff's department proactively get rid of these gangs today with policies? Yes. Could they do it with investigation? Yes. Have they? No. So we've begun that process. We're a perfect tool for it. I greatly appreciate the trust of the legislature, and the governor in signing the bill, and this body, its assistance in this, and we will proceed. Hopefully, I think there'll be some litigation on the issue, but we'll have that with county council as we have. So I mean, that's my summary of where we're at on the law enforcement gangs. We're working on a report to give an update on it a little bit down the road, and we'll include some information about how that process goes, maybe a couple months from now. That, as well as the background about some of the problems within the department. And I think failures to address this problem that is necessary. I'm hoping that before we get to that point, the department jumps into action, but if not, keep going.
You to
in the executive director's report, she mentioned a very high-quality program put on May 4th, Life Inside a Cell. It was very ably moderated by my colleague Luis Garcia here, and it featured in real time a question of Sergeant Aloma, Under Sheriff Aloma, is that correct? Assistant Sheriff, excuse me, about the nature of his own tattoo. And it was in real time, it was a frank and even friendly discussion, and it illuminated the nature of his own tattoo. And I think everyone in that forum came away with a greater sense of trust and a greater sense of respect for him and for the process of openness. And I would just note that one of the common touchstones that law enforcement relies on in Los Angeles County, as it has in many places for generations, is the notion that if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear from questions. And I would say that is reciprocal. And the questions now being asked about gang membership of deputies and the letters being put forward by the OIG, that should not be necessary, but in fact it is. And I would just note that I think that sentiment, or that common touchstone, that if there is nothing to fear about that disclosure, then there really should be nothing to hide.
thank you. We're going to move to or commission. You're actually
Thank you, Chair Kennedy, and I want to thank the members of the committee, chaired by Luis Garcia and with Ms. Cooper as a member. We are bringing forward on behalf of the commission to send to the sheriff involved 2 incidents decided to look into further. They involve deputies mistakenly intruding into the houses and detaining community members for video recording of deputy actions. We call attention to 2 incidents involving LASD deputies. These incidents have gained wide coverage on local news outlets and on social media, and both incidents illustrate how deputies are not complying with constitutional policing practices. And I'm very glad to see that Eileen Decker, overseer of that office in LASD, has joined us. One such incident occurred in October of 2022 when deputies entered the home of the Cordova family in San Gabriel. 2 people were in the house at the time, a 15-year-old and a 19-year-old. It appeared that deputies entered the home without consent and refused to heed audible communication by the homeowner, who self-identified as the mother from a home security system. And the Quality of Life Ad Hoc Committee is concerned at evidence apparent in news accounts that a Latino child was detained because he was filming deputies' efforts to subdue his sister, and that their father was detained separately while attempting to film deputies. The second incident occurred just last month in Compton. And news reports indicate that Derek Cooper, who is a black man, was awoken at 4 a.m. in his own home with deputies' guns drawn. Deputies denied Mr. Cooper's request to put on pants before being escorted half naked outside. This degradation of dignity has drawn comparisons with the contempt for basic humanity shown 2 centuries ago towards fugitive slaves, not the least of which by Mr. Cooper himself. And these incidents raise questions of accountability for deputies' conduct that threatens to undercut trust in deputies' presence in our communities and residents' quality of life. On behalf of the Ad Hoc Committee, I move to direct staff to request policies, data, and other information from LASD relevant to these situations. Thank you.
So, looks like you've made a
Second.
Do we need to take public comment before we take a vote?
okay.
So can we finish this, the rest of the speakers on this item, and then we can do public comment and then take?
Sure. So, Hans, we're just going to wait because our vote requires the public to weigh in. But you have made a motion and it's been seconded. And so, is there any other ad hoc committee report or commissioner comment?
Should report on ad hoc committee on use of force. Just to note that the ad hoc committee, along with other commissioners of the Oversight Commission, opportunity to view a demonstration of call it a new generation of a taser device called a Taser 10. There's nothing really to report other than we're going to continue to monitor some piloting of that device that were to be adopted by the Sheriff's Department. Use of Force Ad Hoc Committee would like to take a look at the policy surrounding potential uses when circumstances it would be used. But it's premature right now. I'm just reporting that just make sure there's full visibility here. That our ad hoc committee, along with other commissioners, did receive that briefing sometime in the last couple of weeks. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Rob. I don't see anyone else. The final subsection of 2 is a report from the Sheriff's Department. Is there anyone who wants to give that report?
They are online, so if the speakers who are online for the presentation on the drones, if you can please turn on your camera and unmute yourself and begin your presentation.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
We do.
Okay, great. Good afternoon. Thank you for taking the time. Apologize. Thank you for taking the time to hear about this important technology that will help us better serve our communities. My name is Jennifer C2, and I'm the captain of Malibu Lost Hills Sheriff Station. I'm also joining me today virtually is Captain John Lackervane from Lancaster Station and Captain Bill Mulder from West Hollywood Station. Sheriff Luna is a visionary and strongly believes in transparency, building strong relationships with the community and bringing the Sheriff's Department into the 21st century. Today, I seek your support in creating a drone pilot program at the 3 stations I just mentioned. The pilot program will last for 1 year as we show proof of concept during all 4 seasons, which is especially important to the Malibu Lost Hills Station because of wildland fires, floods, and summer hikers that suffer from medical emergencies. And this is slide 2. UAS stands for Unmanned Aircraft System. So throughout today's presentation, you may hear me say UAS and you may hear me say drone. The pilot project deployment would cover the following incidents and situations. Emergent or high priority calls where a UAS would enhance public or officer safety. An example would be a containment, large building fires, armed suspects in the area, or the ability to quickly locate victims. 2, rescue missions, missing persons, disaster response, active shooter situations like school shootings, search operations and search warrants that meet the drone deployment criteria, mapping and photography of crime scenes, traffic collisions, and other scenes for evidentiary value. Next slide. So how can this technology help us better serve the community? The drones cover more ground in less time. They can identify a person using thermal imaging. They can communicate with a person in distress and let them know help is coming. They can triage a distressed person's medical needs, provide real-time information to emergency responders who are responding to the incident, and they are dramatically less expensive than the manned aircraft and more nimble in rugged terrain. Next slide. Public transparency. This is the most important slide of the presentation. We are committed to protecting the community's privacy. The UAS, once above an incident or situation, will only start recording when over the incident. This recording will provide an objective view of the incident and ensure emergency responders are following policies and procedures. The drone video feed can also be live streamed to a command center to better address risk management issues. The department provides a yearly report on all drone deployments. This report can be found on the department's website under transparency. The UAS pilot program will work with contract city governments. Additionally, before each deployment of a UAS, we will notify the community of the deployment via social media. Next slide. Recording and photographs. I'm in a unique situation. I actually live in the Malibu Lost Hills jurisdiction. Transparency and professionalism are of the utmost importance to the communities that we serve. The UAS will not record while en route to the incident. The camera will be forward-facing while en route and not looking down. Drone software such as DroneSense will track and log camera position and when the UAS actually starts recording. We will follow state and department policy regarding the retention of UAS recordings. Next slide. This is from our website. This is our transparency promise, and this is a screenshot of the deployment of the UAS deployments in 2022. Next slide. The following slides, we're going to cover situations where we would use a UAS. So high priority and emergent calls for service. Allowing law enforcement to use a UAS during emergent situations will enhance officer safety and safety to the community. We will be able to use a UAS for perimeter security and when we have an armed violent suspect hiding in a location. The UAS will help us find the suspect in a timely manner, protect the community, and limit any road closures and inconvenience to the community. The UAS can be used to communicate a public safety message with instructions to a widespread area. Next slide. Search and rescue operations. The Malibu Search and Rescue Team covers 187 square miles of diverse mountains, beaches, canyons, and home to our famous mountain lions and other wildlife. The Malibu Search and Rescue Team is the busiest team in Los Angeles County and is comprised of reserve deputies. Last year, the team responded to 126 callouts just in this jurisdiction. Next slide. As I mentioned, missing persons and lost and injured hikers, it is essential that we find them quickly. The team responded to 93 callouts for missing and injured hikers. 43 of those searches lasted an hour or more. As a resident who hikes these canyons on hot days, it is common to come across people who are suffering from heat exhaustion and other medical conditions. The terrain is difficult. The chaparral is high. Locating missing and injured hikers in a timely manner can mean life and death. The UAS's thermal imaging will drastically reduce the search time. Next slide. The Malibu Lost Hills jurisdiction is home to the infamous Woolsey Fire. As the first incident commander of Woolsey Fire, drones would have helped me survey the area, plan missions, ability to locate victims, and understand traffic conditions. Of course, any deployment of a drone would be coordinated through unified command. We also have dangerous mudslides down our canyon roads and large boulders that fall and start blocking roads and hitting vehicles. Next slide. Speaking of canyons, a half dozen times a year, our search and rescue team responds to vehicles that have gone over the side of a canyon. As you can see in this picture, it is difficult terrain. Having a drone will allow us to understand how many individuals are in the vehicle, the medical needs, and the equipment the team needs to bring with them in order to perform the rescue. Next slide. This is an actual photo of a UAS given to us by a resident. When we receive a call, when we receive calls for vehicles over the side of the canyon, oftentimes the chaparral is so high we can't see if this is an old collision or a new collision. If we can't see the markings of the X, then we have to actually call search and rescue to respond, hike down the canyon, and determine if this is a new collision. This is where drones will help us out with that. Next slide. As a prior deputy director of the Joint Regional Intelligence Center, I've spent many years studying school shootings and threats, and even speaking with parents who've lost a child in a school shooting. Below is a photo of children who were murdered in the Uvalde school shooting. Early response and assessment of an active school shooter will save lives. Drones have the ability to respond faster than traditional aircraft. They have the ability to quickly locate the shooter and or victims. And they have the ability to provide real-time situational awareness to emergency responders. Again, this technology will save lives. Next slide. Recently, the LA County, experienced a rash of swatting calls or false reports of active shooter incidents at schools. These type of calls traumatizes our children, and it is imperative for law enforcement to quickly respond to help determine if the call is a hoax or not. Next slide. Traffic collision and crime scene mapping. This can be used in a number of ways, but I'm going to cover how we're going to use it in the Malibu Lost Hills jurisdiction. We have a high number of fatalities on PCH. There's one major road into Malibu, and that is PCH. And during a fatality investigation, we have to close lanes in order to measure and investigate the cause of the collision. The UAS will help us to quickly and accurately measure and investigate the scene. This will allow law enforcement to open roads sooner and a less impact to the community and visitors visiting our beautiful beaches. Next slide. This is actually an example of a 3D model. And next slide. A new approach to air support, accessibility. Drones can relieve responsibility of lower priority calls from Aero Bureau and expanding the availability of air support to the community. Cost effectiveness. Drones are substantially cheaper to purchase and operate than manned craft. They do not require fuel. They require very little maintenance. There's less training, fewer crew members, making them the cost-effective option. Safety. Drones can be operated remotely, which means law enforcement officers can keep a safe distance and actually come up with a tactical plan before entering a dangerous situation. Next slide. The use of a drone will reduce the carbon footprint since they are all electric and do not emit emissions. Drones are much quieter than helicopters and significantly reduce noise pollution to the community. They are less intrusive than helicopters. The use of a drone can increase public trust in law enforcement by providing a less intimidating and more transparent approach to policing. Each of us captains have talked with our communities, our city managers, and our council members. You may actually have some elected officials and members of the community in virtual attendance today and can speak about the ideas of the pilot or drone program. Next slide. Captain Lackervane, Captain Mulder, and I are available for any questions, but I just want to thank you for your consideration and your partnership.
Sure. Max, you wanted to weigh in?
I just want to note that this presentation was not done in consultation with the OIG. Had no information regarding it. I wasn't present at an EPC where the subject was brought up, and Sheriff Command staff was advised regarding the prior agreement with this body regarding appropriate use of drones and a procedure in place to protect privacy. As far as I know, that procedure has not been violated, although the people in the room didn't all appear to know about it. And this presentation notably talks about making sure that they're informing contract cities, but says nothing about Inspector General's office or this body or any kind of oversight process. It also references the transparency promise. That's a website created by the previous administration. If you want to go up there and look at the information on police-involved shootings, you'll see that 832.7's requirement of complete information being up there unless there's a written explanation for a delay is still not complied with. So the transparency promise was not an actual transparency promise. It's sort of an Orwellian description. And it had misinformation regarding oversight requests from this body and my office, which I brought to the sheriff's attention, the new administration. They have never printed any kind of retraction or walked back any of the false statements made regarding transparency, but they did remove the false information from that website. So having said that, I am actually a proponent of drone usage, and the usage described in this video I think would be excellent. And I would love to come to a day when that's an appropriate process and we can trust it, and we don't wonder whether or not the things that were unsaid there are addressed. The initial concerns raised by the public at this body regarding the use of drone surveillance for other purposes, investigation of low-level criminal conduct in order to access visually areas that the Constitution prohibits. So if there were indeed such protections in place, and after a robust public discussion, because I think there's a lot of folks who would love to see this technology put in place, and there's a lot of folks who are scared of it, I think there's a very rational governmental approach to satisfying both groups, at least the reasonable requests of both groups, and doing it with proper oversight. I would be a big proponent. But just to be clear, that video you just saw, first time I saw it. Thank you.
Chair,
Yes.
I would, just for purposes of institutional memory, like to remind this commission and assembled that way back in our early days in 2017, which ad hoc committee initially reviewed, this was under Sheriff Donald, proposed uses of UAVs. We studied that issue very carefully. We did approve limited uses, I think pretty much every use that was just described by the captain with privacy protections. And if those recommendations are violated, we'd like to know about that, by the way. But the reality is, to necessarily reinvent the wheel too many times here, perhaps if nothing else, I would request that staff dig out the report and recommendations that the Civilian Oversight Committee made. It was 2017, I'm guessing around September 2017, on this very subject and circulated to members of the commission. But in any event, we can look at it again, of course, and probably should take a look at it again in light of what's been described to us. But those seem to me to be the identical uses and limited uses for which Sheriff McDonald was proposing the use of UASs, and I believe, so far as I know, UASs were used, have been used by the Sheriff's Department. This is not new.
Yes, could I ask, how is this proposal or policy different than the existing one under Sheriff McDonald?
If I could, Mr. Chairman, if I could jump in for a moment, thank you. And I'll leave it to the captains to go into more specifics, but by way of background, Commissioner Bonner is correct. There's an existing policy, and it's our website. Certainly, perhaps we can do a better job of what's on the website, and I think that's something that we'll into. The policy does exist, but it's limited to usage by one unit, and it came to our attention that several cities were interested in purchasing, supporting this effort, particularly in Lost Hills. The city council there, it's my understanding it's the city council, requested this, particularly with respect to lost hikers, which would mean we would have to amend current policy. And I understood the department made an agreement some time back, if ever that policy were to be amended and changed, the department would come to this body. So that was the context for the presentation today, to get your feedback on extending and creating a pilot program in these 3 cities, to come back to this commission and present the data on usage. And to the Inspector General, he's correct. We should have consulted with him prior to. There's no question, and I will take responsibility for that personally, that we should have ensured he was aware, get his feedback. Certainly, we hoped in this public forum we would be able to get everybody's feedback. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Understand why there's something different here. It's authorizing I think it was the Aero Bureau, Special Enforcement Bureau, to at least initially three stations to use UASs. Something different, but it doesn't seem to me to be profoundly different. Okay.
I believe that's correct, but perhaps the captains have further information on that.
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Sorry, Captain, do you have any additional information to add than what I had said that perhaps you didn't hear, though?
Okay. Yes, I heard most of it, so sorry about that. So right now, as the policy stands right now, in order when I have a vehicle over the cliff or when I have a lost hiker, I actually have to call SEB, which is in East LA, and ask for a drone. They call someone who's on call. If they're not at SEB, they drive all the way to Eastern, pick up a drone, and then have to drive it all the way to the Malibu Lost Hills jurisdiction. This can be up to 3 to 4 hours. I have requested drones, and I think only one time it actually made it here in time. And, these are critical hours, especially when I have mountain lions, people have medical issues. And so that's why I was working with Ms. Decker of how important it is to get this on the agenda before my summer season, where it gets really hot here, and my fire season that's coming up in September. So I'm speaking from Malibu Lost Hills. That's how it stands right now. And what we ask is the support of actually being able to deploy these drones at the station level, because it's a better way to support our community. And I know Captain Lackervane is going to deploy, or is going to use them differently, actually partner with the city. I don't know if Captain Lackervane, you want to talk about your partnership?
Yeah, thank you. I want to say thank you to the commission also for taking the time to listen to us about this. The reason we did bring it back to you is because we wanted to make sure that we weren't So we wanted to partner with you guys and be clear what our intents are. In the Lancaster area, we're looking to amend the policy so that we can partner with our city who has a drone program. It's in its infancy, but they are developing a robust drone policy or drone program with policy. They have made it accessible or they would like to make it accessible to us so that we could use it in place of air coverage that, quite frankly, we're not getting a lot of due to staffing issues at Aero Bureau. The city has an expectation that they'll get some air coverage when we have emergencies. That expectation has gone unfulfilled. So they moved forward in developing this program they have oversight in place. They plan on partnering with us to make sure we can do the reporting. And we have some very restricted airspace up here in the Antelope Valley due to the development stuff and government activities that go on up here. The city has already purchased all of the licensing and got their personnel qualified to fly, even in some of those restricted areas, should we need them. So the city asked us to make sure that we could make this available to the personnel up here to enhance public safety. Our need for using it is not exactly the same as Lost Hills, but it's my understanding that there's other cities within the county that would like to make this available to the sheriff's department also. That's the reason we came to you and asked if we could add it to this pilot project and modify the policy that's in place to achieve that goal. And then we would like to report back to you and tell you what our result findings are, hopefully successful results from the pilot project.
Modifications that are listed before us, I didn't see them.
No, sir. We wanted to get feedback first and hear from the commission, hear from the city councils in each of these jurisdictions are reporting back their process. And after getting feedback from everyone.
Well, much appreciated for that.
I'm sorry, Chair Kennedy, can I inquire, there was a comment made that the city is flying drones? Can I ask what the legal basis for that is? How is that happening? And who's doing it? The city up in Antelope Valley, I think Captain Mike. What, can I ask for some clarification on what we're talking about?
Yes, I believe the public safety director from the city is on the meeting. He may need to be upgraded to a panelist to make a comment on it, but the city of Lancaster has a drone program that was authorized by the city government. They have certified and licensed pilots, and they have secured all of the airspace permissions that are required to fly for their city activities. We are not currently utilizing it in any law enforcement capabilities. But that's what we're looking for, is to utilize it in place of our rotary aircraft that are difficult to get up here in the Antelope Valley.
And we do have Chris Roberts from the city of Lancaster. I've sent a request for you to acknowledge and unmute yourself. Please go ahead, Chris.
Hello, can you hear me?
We do hear you. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Chris Roberts, the Assistant Director of Public Safety for the City of Lancaster. We are here, and I can answer your questions about our program as well. We're very infant on it. We use it primarily for marketing, for public works, for some of our code enforcement operations, and for covering our parks areas right now. But we are looking to be able to provide service to the Sheriff's Department in a cooperative partnership because, as was mentioned, Aero Bureau has a hard time getting up here. A lot of times there's so many high wind days and coming over the ridge is prohibitive to Aero Bureau even getting out here. And our drones are able to fly in up to 40 mile-an-hour winds. And so we're successful in being able to provide that support. Our our history with the Sheriff's Department in the past, we have a lot of respect for civilian oversight. We want to work alongside civilian oversight opinion, recommendations, and then also with the Sheriff's Department. So we want to parallel what the county's doing, what county decisions are in our program as well. But as was mentioned, we do have FAA certifications. We have certified pilots. We have spotters. We have worked with the agencies who control the restricted airspace. We've worked with the FAA. We are currently in process of getting approval. There's multiple levels of approval for different levels of airspace. We have several of those, and we're working on our COA right now.
Official with the city of.
Sorry, I can't hear if somebody's talking.
Chris Roberts from the city of Lancaster. They were asking what your name is, sir. Would you repeat what your position with the city is?
Yes, my name is Chris Roberts, Roberts. I am the Assistant Director of Public Safety for the city of Lancaster.
Thank you.
Mr. Roberts, it's a pleasure to have you on the meeting today. I wanted to draw to your attention the actions and the discussion at this oversight body at last month's meeting. You mentioned your respect for civilian oversight. I wanted to ask if you were aware of or had read the report from this commission or the proceedings of last month's meeting at which we discussed the problem of over-policing of Lancaster and Palmdale schools, of school children as young as 7 being subject to deputy action to cite and arrest them, and the pervasive problem of racial profiling and of punishment of students in Lancaster schools from elementary through middle and high school documented in last month's meeting. Are you aware of that?
That doesn't have to do with Drone Star, but I'm happy to answer your questions. No, not aware. Let me give you some quick background on me. I am in my 3rd week of employment with Lancaster. So you give me a little bit of time to go back and look at you. But I was brought here from Butte County, where I served for the last 3 years as the Director of Emergency Preparedness, School Safety, and Security for the Butte County Office of Education, and am very well versed in how law enforcement should be interacting on our schools, and very well versed in what an ideal public safety program looks like at a school campus.
Well, I ask in part because one of the requested uses here involves schools and school shootings or accusations or alerts involving SWAT calls or shootings at schools. And so I ask also of Captain Lackerbane, Captain Lackerbane, were you aware of this Civilian Oversight Commission's report from last month about the incidents of deputy-involved punishment, citation, and arrests of students and the racial disparities in those data from Lancaster and Palmdale involving the Lancaster station?
Yes, Commissioner, I'm aware of the report, and I've been following your meetings regarding it and the public comment.
And do you have, in addition to the proactive policies that are being described here about authorized uses, what protections do you have that preempt any uses that go beyond those limited authorized uses that have been brought before this commission before?
I'm not sure what your question is, sir. If you could be a little more detailed or ask maybe specific. I can provide a scenario of what we intended, if that would be more clear. Or if you have something that clarifies your question, I could answer it better.
Yes, I guess what I'm getting at is the potential for mission creep, something that has happened before with Sheriff's Department policies. I want to ask, in addition to the limited uses that are authorized, what specific prohibitions and protections against any uses beyond those limited uses are in place?
I don't know that the city of Lancaster will have drone policy that specifies their use. I'm not sure where their policy development is on that. If that's something the commission would like to see, I can't promise because I can't answer for the city. A scenario that we envision using it in is, as Captain C2 referred to, there several months ago, or actually 3 months ago, the entire county and actually most of the cities and counties on the western side of this country were subjected to a swatting call that had the exact same information in it as to where these victims were within the school. I think the person who perpetrated this action was not aware that the school that they called in the Lancaster area was already on their spring break, whereas many of the other schools were still in session. And we had a difficult time getting into the school to verify what was actually going on in the school because the campus was locked down. And we can't just walk away from that kind of incident because the campus is locked down. We have to proceed with all due care and caution and get into the location to find out if there is someone who's a victim. It took us an inordinate amount of time to get into that facility. Whereas if we had air coverage, which was tied up on a school that was actually had students in it at the time, we could have solved the problem in a quicker manner. Or if we'd have had a drone available to go to the location, we could have solved the problem and restored order and given the community some sense of relief in those kinds of situations. You know, I'm a parent of high school students. Every time one of these incidents occurs at a high school, I worry for my children, and I'd like them to be able to return to their normal routine as quickly as possible. That's the kind of scenario we envision using these for within the schools. I can't think of another reason why we would be there to use them. You know, the I understand what you're speaking about mission creep, but if the commission had some kind of suggestions about how to limit that, I'm sure we would be open to that discussion.
Commissioner Chris Roberts, again, I can speak to a specific incident which I think might describe what your concerns are and maybe explain the flip side of that. Within the last
Quickly,
three,
because we have public comment.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
If you could make your point quickly, because I'd like to get to public comment.
Absolutely. Within the last 3 months, up in Butte County, a high school had a report of guns on campus. Chico PD just very recently, within the last 8 months, I believe, instituted their drone program with the city. And they were able to fly a drone over the school and get a very early, accurate representation of what was occurring on the school. Found out that it wasn't as intense as all the information coming out on Facebook. And we're able to put the parent groups at ease, the student groups at ease, the school population, and that was without having law enforcement storming in large numbers onto our campus. So it was actually very welcomed in that situation, and that's what we're intending for these types of situations too.
Thank you. Max, I'm going to give you the final word before we open it up.
I just want to say, again, having been present at a sheriff's department meeting when this issue was raised months ago, I wish somebody had sat down and written a policy to adjust the policy that we already had in place, to make a proposal, talk to my office, talk to you about that. If you wanted drones in the air by the summer, that's the way to do it. Not to lead with this, but to lead with protections for civil rights. Lancaster is where we had a problem between partnership with local government resulting in the county having a consent decree. Lancaster is where in our school resource development report, the same issue was raised by the department, that the reason there's a racial disparity is because they don't control where the calls for service come from. Now we have a proposal to partner with local government without safeguards being led up front to put drones in the air. I just think we're rushing forward to do a thing without any safeguards, and it's a big, big mistake. Having said that,
well, I'm hoping that based on Eileen's comments, they're going to propose a policy to us, which we'll look at, and maybe our staff could investigate the historical record. Because, Rob, my memory was that the original policy in 2017 was brought before this commission, and it's more limited. And in a divided vote, we said no, but that the sheriff chose to implement the policy anyway, but he added civil rights protections. And I also want to say that it was a close vote, and I think many commissioners were more concerned about the lack of public comment than the substantive policy. JP?
Yeah, having been at all those meetings, I would just like to add, although you are absolutely correct, the commission voted to not allow the drones. The sheriff, at that time, Sheriff McDonald, went ahead with it. He did adopt every recommendation that we made to the policy. And so even though the majority of the commission didn't want the drone program to go forward, it did, but it went forward, incorporating every recommendation that this body had made. So I think that's a good sign that if, I don't know what's going to happen here, I have some concerns myself. Many of them have already been voiced here. I won't reiterate, but I think we put some real good guardrails around this thing. It's at least the potential that we could move forward, but I have many, many questions yet need to be answered.
Mr. Chair, just to reiterate, the objective was to hear from you, to hear from the public before presenting a proposal. We could be criticized by, presenting a proposal and then everybody saying, well, you gave it to us in final form. Why didn't you listen to us? So the objective is to listen today, to get your feedback, hear these concerns, and come forward with a proposal, consultation perhaps with an ad hoc committee or whatever you choose.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and because that's what I'm feeling is going on here. It's kind of like a little preamble to, and we're finding our way how to work together. Because if you didn't come forward before, we might complain that you didn't come soon enough. Now we're complaining that you came too soon, maybe. So I just want to acknowledge that we, as I mentioned earlier, we have to find our way in a lot of things. So I really do appreciate the attempts to really maintain some good communication and connections.
We're not perfect. Work with you. If you'd rather it a different way, that's okay too, but that was the objective.
Public comment.
Yes, we have 9 speakers on this item. We'll take the in-person speakers first. The first speaker is Isaac Asbury, followed by Ron Dowell and Alejandra Marroquin. If the speakers could line up at the podium right behind Mr. Asbury, that would be great. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
First of all, I want to thank the Civilian Oversight Commission for what you do. And I also want to thank East LA, this side, probably Lancaster on that side, and Compton in the middle. Anyway, these deputy gangs, I started my little deal 15 years ago when Avery Cody, 16 years old, was shot in the back by a jump out boy, right? That's 15 years ago. And I had a team intervention program in Compton, right? So I started monitoring these deputy gangs. I started monitoring all the shootings, right? So everywhere I go, I provide somebody this list of all the shootings in the past 23 years. It has the names, station, what gangs they're in, whatever the case may be. You can't say I haven't given it to you, okay? Give it to you again today. Then I went to the organizational chart for Sheriff Luna. You have over 17 gang members, alleged gang members, in his staff. And then I don't want to really go on to tattoos. I want to deal with the fatal shootings and the conduct. The hell with the tattoos, right? The fatal shootings, get that tattoo. And there's only 3 stations you got to be concerned with: East LA, Century, Lancaster, Fort, and Compton. That's all I have. I present this to Miss Decker. Let me finish this. I trust her more than anybody I trust in this entire room next to Mr. Kennedy. All right?
Thank you, sir. That concludes your time.
Compton's deteriorating infrastructure and inattentiveness to sheriff performance present a health and safety risk to the public and is emblematic of the city's overall troubles. In October 2022, the state auditor reported that half of Compton's streets are in poor condition. Its water wells and related infrastructure are decaying, and it has yet completed overdue sewer system upgrades despite numerous overflows of sewage that have threatened public health and the environment. Last Tuesday, the water manager reported to the council that half of the operable wells have volatile organic compounds and perfluorooctane sulfonic contamination. Unprepared as usual, not one member questioned this finding. No member asked about the source of the contamination. Not one member asked about the health advisory level or the hazard quotient. What is the cleanup goal? Is the water contamination related to broken sewer lines? What is the remediation order between contaminated water, compromised sewers, and the need for street repair and replacement? We support the OIG to get to the bottom of the deputy gang problem, as Compton appears to be ground zero of their bloodlust. No one will confirm that the problem no longer exists at Compton Station. It may be a good idea for the city of Compton representatives to participate in the interviews for no other reason than to weed out executioners, proud boys, and oath keepers. We've asked and will continue to demand that Compton require all incoming sheriff contract personnel to appear and introduce themselves to the public during city council meetings, tell their reasons for choosing to work in Compton and what benefits the city will receive. I have a copy of what I was going to say to submit for.
Thank you, Mr. Dow.
Hi, good morning. My name is Alejandra Marroquin, and I am the District Director for Los Angeles City Council Member Hugo Soto Martinez. I'm here to speak about the death of Andres Guardado at the hands of Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. At the time of his death, Andres Guardado was a resident of our district, Council District 13. Beyond that, this killing is extremely personal for the council member because Andres was the son of his friend and longtime co-worker, Cristobal Guardado. Merely adopting a stronger policy on deputy gangs and other recommendations directed only to the sheriff and LASD, while worthwhile and even necessary, will not be sufficient to eradicate deputy gangs and address the manifold associated problems. And besides understanding the impact of deputy gangs on LASD and its deputies, we must also have a full grasp of their devastating impact on local communities. Therefore, the Commission should, number one, fully investigate the devastating impact of deputy gangs on our communities, and two, develop a holistic set of recommendations, not just for the sheriff and LASD, but to all relevant stakeholders, especially the Board of Supervisors. The board should do everything in its power to overhaul the entire sheriff's department, its culture and footprint, and advance solutions that transform the relationship between the county, the sheriff, and LASD, and the public, once and for all. The Guardado family came to Los Angeles in pursuit of the American dream, fleeing violence and political instability in their home country of El Salvador. At the time of his death, Andres had just graduated high school. He worked multiple jobs to help support his family. He was kind and had big dreams that he was never able to fulfill because he was shot in the back 5 times and killed at the young age of 18. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Michelle Infante.
Commissioners, what she said, right? What they said. Did you pay attention? She snowballed all of you. And underneath the table there, she actually took the 5th. She only told you half the truth. Half the truth. And she came up here and silently took the 5th. You don't deserve to be up here.
You've probably traumatized a lot of families by coming up here and only telling half the truth. I'd like to know from you how you think that half truths on an investigation report is going to go over well with the family who lost their loved ones that were killed by LASD. What truth is there in half the truths? And then what happens is that snowballs down to the coroner's office, Deputy Francisco. That goes down to the coroner's office, and now all that's going to happen is the coroner's going to perpetuate the lie. So the next time when they send LASD up here, they shouldn't send you. She obviously took a private oath under the table and took the fifth by not telling you all the truth, and you know that. So you need to start demanding that when they bring people up here, that they talk the truth and they tell the truth. Don't come up here and show us the culture that's been happening for decades. It's a culture, and she just showed it to you, to your face. She lied, and she took a private oath under the table, the fifth. Everything about what we're talking about here. And Max Huntsman had to come in and tell you the other half of the truth. You don't belong here. LASD better send someone next time that's a lot more responsible, maybe someone who has some ethics and morals, because you can't come up here and tell half the truth and expect to be supported by anyone in this audience.
Thank you. And we do have 5 speakers who will be tuning in online. Christina Vasquez, a request has been sent for you to unmute. If you can acknowledge that, then we'll go ahead and take your comment first. Next will be Helen Jones and then Tamra. Christina, please go ahead.
Hi, good morning. My name is Cristina Vasquez. I'm the wife of Marco Vasquez, who was shot and killed by the Pico Rivera Sheriff Station on October 6th of 2019. I hope that Andres's case shines the light on the mishandling of not only his case, but several others. I hope it brings to light the corruption that not only breeds in the Sheriff's Department, but also in the homicide investigators and the DA's office. I cannot speak too much right now on my husband's case because we met with the DA back in October and then again in November. Even after they stated they had made their decision and provided us with a report that was full of lies and inconsistencies, our attorneys responded to the DA's office requesting a few things be corrected. And if they refuse to do so, then to also include our full testimonies. To this date, they have not released the report. They have stopped responding to our attorneys, and I cannot help but to question why. I hope that the mishandling of most of the cases has you all questioning why, and that something is done to correct all of this. Thank you.
Thank you. And next is Helen Jones. Helen, if you can acknowledge the unmute feature. Helen, an unmute request, please go ahead. Helen, I see that you're unmuted, but I don't see you anymore. Now, Tamra, we'll go ahead with you next. A request has been sent. You're unmuted now, Tamra. Go ahead. Yes, we hear you.
Thank you. So we reject any funding for drones and tasers. We know it'll be disproportionately used on the surveillance of and harm and killing of Black and brown people. There's not been any evidence that police or sheriffs have stopped or hindered any school shootings. In fact, there's been police and sheriffs at school shootings, and they've failed to even attempt to go in the buildings to save children. So the notion of police and more resources to police and sheriffs that are going to provide safety for the community is ridiculous when we know they just protect property and white, rich, and wealthy folks. It's also very disturbing that y'all, a civilian oversight board, allows so much time to the sheriff's department that has known sheriff gangs that have killed and harmed and continue to harass family members that have had their loved ones killed. And this board continues to give them a lot of time in the civilian oversight meeting, right? This is unacceptable. We need to put funding into housing and mental health services, not more drones, not more tasers that are considered less than lethal that actually kill people, like in the LAPD case of Keenan Anderson recently, right? We need services, and we need non-law enforcement, unarmed response, community-based teams that are responding to calls, not more money for law enforcement that is ciphering the budget for services the community needs. It's really
Cameron, that does conclude your time. Next, we'll hear from MJ King.
Thanks, Max Huntsman, for acknowledging the current lies and lack of transparency in the department on this topic around drones and surveillance. I can't believe you're even discussing increasing funding for surveillance for a department so embroiled in scandal. Ask Eileen Decker about LAPD's empty promises to secure surveillance tools to criminalize our most vulnerable community members. You know how difficult it is to get LASD to release any information. They'll say it's for finding missing hikers in Malibu now, and you'll have to unwind the harm from its misuse for years to come. Speaking of Eileen Decker, I'm deeply concerned that a person who spent years rubber stamping LAPD misconduct is running a constitutional policing that's supposed to address deputy gangs. How much is her salary? How do you expect to instill confidence in the community if you continue to shuffle the same cop apologizers around under the guise of oversight? It sounds like you're okay with more of the same. How dare Jennifer Situ invoke the children of the Uvalde massacre when that was a glaring example of how police do not act, how they do not keep us safe. Drones wouldn't have prevented the multitude of inactions of the police at that scene. That is shameful. How dare you let them come and spout such bullshit? No new surveillance for the LASD, no new funding, no more enabling their crimes against our community. If this commission isn't familiar with the scandal with LAPD surveillance, please educate yourselves.
Thank you.
Thank you. And next will be Adriana Quinones. A request has been sent. Please go ahead.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do. Please go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Adriana Quinones. A resident of Hacienda Heights. And today I wanted to make you aware that you continue stating that you would like transparency under the new sheriff. And just to remind you that Sheriff Luna has not had a town hall meeting. Therefore, he doesn't know what the community really thinks about what is going on. There's no community outreach, no community input. So I suggest that the town hall meetings include the oversight committee so that you can hear from the community as well. As far as the drones, if this is another way, another tool, let's try it. Let's not bring it down. Ideas are always good, but also include the community. Start going out into the community, and these meetings should be held in the evening, not in the morning where most of us are working. I would like to see more participation from San Gabriel Valley. We seem to be forgotten in all of these meetings. So I would suggest that the next meeting be held in the San Gabriel Valley. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And next we'll hear from Robert Ray. Robert, if you can acknowledge the unmute request. Robert, please acknowledge. There you are. Go ahead.
Thank you. I live in Compton, and I'm looking forward to seeing you folks next month in person in Compton. But first, with regard to drones, I live very close to the Compton airport, and I would much rather have a quiet drone than a noisy helicopter flying over my house all day. And with regard to the incident Ms. Huntsman talked about with the gentleman paraded butt naked outside, those deputies were responding to what was an allegedly alarm call. Turned out that building didn't even have an alarm service. So my questions, who was supervising these deputies when that happened? And how much training are these deputies getting? From the pictures that were shown, and luckily they had their cameras on to show their idiocy, but I don't recognize any of them. They look kind of young. And then it did the previous incident with the takeovers and the looting of the Arco gas station. The following Monday, Channel 7 News inquired to the deputy that he was interviewing, why didn't deputies respond to the takeover and the looting? And the deputy said lack of resources. Compton sheriffs have billed the city of Compton $2 million for 1 month of service. For $2 million, they should have found the resources. And having been a former volunteer, I'm very familiar with policy that if any station with deputies needs assistance, all they do is call an adjacent station and request additional deputies. Compton could have called Carson, Lakewood, or Linwood and had more deputies come to their assistance, but nobody bothered to call. So again, I'm looking forward to seeing you guys in Compton next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. And next is Andres Kwan. Please go ahead, Andres.
Andres Kwan, ACLU and Tech the Sheriff. ACLU's position on sheriff drones is no, period. I think the same sheriff speaker who asked for the drones says Sheriff Luna is a visionary. First of all, it's an oxymoron to put sheriff and visionary together. Second, that's quite the statement, especially coming right after the discussion how the Sheriff's Department is still out of compliance with state law requiring the department establish clear policies prohibiting deputy gangs. It's been 6 months since Luna's taken the helm and Villanueva has been gone, but as today's discussion makes clear, the same Sheriff's Department remains. And so let me echo what we've said to you at the last COC meetings. One of the main reasons we brought Measure Rate last year is because it was less about the sheriff, who the sheriff was at the top, but rather it's about structural change and the need to overhaul the entire department. We cannot depend on sheriffs saying they want to do the right thing, but even assuming they do, they can't alone transform a department with management and staff who at a minimum sat idly by as the department rotted from within. What's more, only adopting a deputy gang policy and other LAC level reforms, while necessary, they won't cut it. And that's because deputy gangs are a symptom of the pervasive culture in the LAC of lawlessness, secrecy, brutality that has given rise to deputy gangs in the first place. And so we must overhaul the entire department and its culture. One sheriff cannot resolve a crisis that has persisted for more than 5 decades. And so here we need to maximize what every other relevant stakeholder can do, whether it is the Board of Supervisors, County Council, the DA. And on this regard, Tech the Sheriff submitted to this commission a letter in March with priority recommendations. Importantly, it's long overdue for the board to overhaul LAC's disciplinary system, which, as the OIG report established years ago, it has suffered from significant structural and cultural impediments to effective discipline and meaningful accountability. And personally, I'm deeply troubled by what appears to be the DA's office doing the absolute minimum, investigating the homicide of Andres Guardado and other loved ones whose families are speaking today.
Thank you. And next, we'll try Helen Jones again. Helen, you're unmuted. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We do.
Yes, thank you. Yes, just like I echo what Andres Kwan just said, on the drone use, it's no on the drones. We haven't even got transparency with the murders and the killings of the sheriff department with the deputy gangs. We already know that most deputy gangs, these are kids of long time sheriff employees. These are their nephews. These are their children. These are their family members. These are their friends that's involved inside the sheriff department. That's why we can't get no transparency. That secrecy that been going on for over 50 years. So how could we trust some drone activity from the sheriff department when the deputy gangs got control of all of that? They got control of the stations. They go out on calls. We always been hearing about them doing drive-by shooting. So how could we turn around and then trust them with some drones? Because we already know you will say you're using it for one thing, and then it'll be turned around to be used on the citizens of Los Angeles County, spread it all the way across like it's going on now. So we say no to more giving the sheriff department more toys to corrupt and to mess over the public like they've been doing. First, let's get some accountability on the murders and the killings. Let's do that first. First, do that with the families first. Stop spitting in the families' faces. Show us some accountability on the killing of our children, the killing of our family members before you try to help them implement something else to use against us later on down the line. And just like Andres said, it'll take years for us to roll that back once you give them this. So first, give us some transparency on these murders that and killings that they're doing.
Chair Kennedy, we have one more in-person speaker on this item. Ms. Luna?
Don't know where to start. I'll start off by talking about the elephant in the room. Someone missing from the table as usual. Robert Luna not present. He wasn't present in East LA for the deputy gang hearing. Wasn't present in Palmdale for the community deputy gang conference. Is he going to be present in South LA for that one on the 24th of June? As far as the drones go, I think it's pretty clear what the community has been saying for years. We're already over-policed. Don't need drones flying in our communities, harassing us. I don't need drones flying over my son's high school. I don't need drones in my niece's elementary school. I don't need drones in the preschool where I work. I don't need drones flying around my community over-policing us. In regards to the murder of Andres Guardado and just that whole case in general, from top to bottom, it's a problem. You know, the way that it was handled, the way that the investigation was conducted, the way that everybody involved in that investigation has some type of tie to a deputy gang is extremely problematic. It reminds me of the murder of Paul Rea. Same situation. Hector Saavedra is a prospect of the Bandidos gang. He was present at the Kennedy Hall incident. You know, once again, they investigated themselves and cleared themselves of wrongdoing. Similar case in my nephew's murder. I mean, his case from top to bottom, everybody involved is a prospect of the deputy gang, and you know, continuing to give this department more money is continuing to inflict harm, trauma, and abuse on our communities, and it's something that there needs to be a stop to it. You know, we need to stop funding the department more money and start funding our communities. How much of our taxpayer dollars are going to go into having these drones flying around our community when that money can go into community you know, recreation? It can go into stuff that'll help our kids instead of surveillancing them. So a no for the drones.
That does conclude public comment on this item. We do have the vote on Commissioner Johnson's motion.
We're going to take that up after a break. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we're going to start up immediately with our guests from the Department of Public Health and waiting patiently.
Thank you, everyone, for making time for the break. We will be returning soon. So if you are in the room, please make your way back to the seats. And if you are online, we should be resuming very shortly. If you're online, the next item that will be coming up is the Family Assistance Program. So if you would like to make public comment for that, please raise your hand online. So if you are in the room, please make your way back to the seats. Thank you.
Friends, we're going to start up again because we have this room until 1. So we're going to take up the next issue on the agenda, which is item 3A, the Family Assistance Program that is extremely important to this commission. In September 2018, the commission unanimously approved the report and recommendation on family assistance and communication related to the families of those who were killed by deputies or while in the custody of LASD. Over the last 5 years, the county has taken some steps to implement the family assistance program. I don't think it's fully implemented it. And we have a few speakers here today to update us on the status of the program as we work to ensure its permanence. So I'm going to invite our speakers to come up and introduce themselves and hear from the speakers about how it's going.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for having me here. My name is Miriam Brown. I'm a Deputy Director with Los Angeles County Department of Mental Health Emergency Outreach and Triage Division. And I have been working with the Family Assistance Program pretty much since its inception. So next, please. So a little bit of the background. On July 2019, the Board of Supervisors directed the Department of Mental Health to implement the Family Assistance Program to assist those families who lost their loved ones due to use of force, officer-involved shooting. And then later on, they also included the inmate deaths that needed to be investigated. So what have we done since then? We really work hard to make sure that the families obtain the proper services. So initially, what we did is we really developed relationships with different departments, but the implementation process was a little bit difficult because we really had to go through the process. Two things that had to be given and provided to the families was mental health services and other resources, but additionally funding towards their funeral expenses, cremation, whatever they chose to do, up to $7,500. As we went through the process, we had to develop relationships with LASD Homicide Division to make sure that they communicate with us. We develop relationships with other entities, LASD, in the inmate and the jail, so they can notify us with the information. We provided mental health services. We were available 24/7 whenever these events took place. And what happened through that process, it's they will notify us that there was an incident and they were en route to the scene, so we can be prepared and have a team ready and go available and assist the families. There were many times that families were not there. We were there and the incident of Andres Guardado. I personally spoke with the family, provided the services on scene, and followed through with them along with other families. Additionally, we had to implement a system because oftentimes families were not willing to talk to us. They felt that we were part of the sheriff's department, so eventually we met with them individually. We explained to them who we were, what were there, and what kind of services we were able to provide. We developed relationships with others, entities such as the Mexican consulate, because there were officer-involved shootings in which we had to make arrangements to get a power of attorney and make sure that the deceased went back to his native country, and as well with other states because the remains or the body had to be transferred to another state. And we have prepared yearly reports on what we have been doing. Please. Challenges. The goal was to provide mental health services or whatever services they needed. Unfortunately, many families only accepted the financial services that we were providing, which is totally understandable. As a mental health professional, just trying to get mental health services when you're going through such a traumatic event, it's very difficult. So we did work with them and follow up and trying to see if eventually they will get services. Some families did not answer, nor they wanted to be involved with our services simply because they have attained a lawyer and the lawyer had instructed them that they will not speak with them. In maybe a couple of occasions, the lawyers spoke with us. We explained today what we did and the families accepted services. Of course, COVID-19 really changed the type of services we provided. We were doing in person. Once that it took place, it was really difficult because a lot of people were not out on the streets or in the hospitals. But regardless of that, if there was the need, we were able to be in person whenever needed. The collaboratives with LASD Homicide Bureau have worked well up until this time. I know there's been changes in terms of the command staff, but they do notify us in real time. And I'm the primary point person for them. So what they do is they call me, regardless of the hour of the day, they call me to provide me the information, follow up with an email, and let us know whether we're needed in person or not. Similarly, we have developed a relationship with the in custody where they notify us, sometimes text messaging, just giving us the alert, other times via email. Sometimes it's a communication with both, with the in custody and the Homicide Bureau, because the investigation is going on and it's happening at the jails. We developed a relationship with the medical examiner corners, which was critical in this process because there were times that it was really difficult to obtain information for the next of kin or others. But working in collaboration with the coroner's office really facilitated the process and gave us the ability to work with the families and connect them to them. Most recently, as of last year, we've been working with Public Health, the Office of Violence and Prevention, to really make sure that we are working as the program is going to be transitioned into their Office of Violence and Prevention. And we have collaborated with multiple social services agencies to provide the services. Next. Next slide, please. Now I'm going to give you a little bit of the statistics in terms of what we have done. As you can see, we developed that by year. 1920, the family assistance, the year 1920, which was August to June, there was a number of incidents were 20. We assisted 20 families. We were unable to contact 11 families. 6 families declined assistance, and in others, we left multiple messages. There were 3 that there was not next of kin, and we were not able to identify the information. And that happened more often with the inmates because families have not heard from them, or there was old information. You see 2021, it was 22 families with 4 unable to contact, 7 declined assistance, with 5 left multiple messages, and only 1 with no next of kin. 21, 22, we assisted 12 families, unable to contact 4, declined assistance 8, left multiple messages to 14 families, and 4 with no next of kin. And today, in year 2023, 22-23, we have assisted 30 families. We have received information about 13 families. Of those 6, we were unable to contact them. 2 declined family assistance, left messages. And if you can see the number per year, and it's a total of 151 incidents. Next. Now we had the breakdown with the community officer-involved shooting. As you can see, there was a decrease, 19-20, 15, 20-21, 6, 21-22, 9, 22-23, 4, with a total of 34 for the past 4 years. In custody, jail, and hospital, that's the majority of the scenarios that we have received. It's, if you can see, 27, 30, 32, 20, with a total of 109 incidents. In custody community, and I'm going to clarify because I know somebody asked me that question already. In custody community, what happened in some of those cases, there was no officer-involved shooting. I did inquire with Homicide. There were times that the individual was detained for whatever reason, and there was a medical emergency, but there was no officer-involved shooting. And that's the information we received. We still provided the services whenever were accepted. Next. We have the breakdown in terms of ethnicity and gender, and as you can see, if we can see the total by year, the African American, we have 26, Caucasian 20, Latino 51, Asian 3%, and we have 1 that it's unknown. I tried to obtain the information, couldn't get the information of the unknown, but again, you can see the breakdown by year and the totals. In terms of the gender, you can see 93% were males compared to 7% females. Next. And here is the expenses, what we have paid to the families for the expenses. And as you can see, for the 4 years, we have paid a total of $239,000, 29 and 34 cents. And it all happened at different times, not necessarily by the year, simply because for some families, it takes time to get the proper documentation. Sometimes they're ambivalent about getting the services. So 2 things happen with the burial expenses. If the funeral or the cremation, whatever took place, already happened, what we do is we work with them so they can become vendors. So we help them through the process to become vendors through the county, and we help them to obtain the documents so they can receive payment. So there are some, we have some that are still incomplete because they're looking for the paperwork. So even though the services have taken place, we still work with them to reimburse them through the vendoring system. And this pretty much concludes my presentation in terms of what we do. But I have to tell you that I have personally been involved and have gone to many of the incidents with, you can see there's 4 other managers to provide the services to the families. We work closely with the families to provide whatever it takes or whatever they need. But we also are mindful that we need to respect. There are times that they don't want to speak with us, and that's fine. But in time they may, give them their space. If they choose not to get our services, we also respect that. It is a program that it does require a lot of, you know, case management services to work with the families. So they can't trust the system. Oftentimes they don't trust the system. They say, you're gonna give me this, you're gonna give me paperwork. And it is paperwork, but we explain to them that we have to go through the process in order to assist them. There's others that have accepted the mental health services that they require. We connect them to the services, we provide them, and then provide them with their privacy so we don't follow up in terms of their treatment. We just make sure that they're connected to services. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. We're going to take questions after speakers. So we're going to
Good morning, Commissioners. Thank you for the opportunity to update you on the transition of the Family Assistance Program to the Department of Public Health, Office of Violence Prevention. To our slide, please. To give a little bit of, and my name is Andrea Welsing. I am the Director of the Office of Violence Prevention. I'm here today with my colleague, Fisher, who's the Deputy Director. I want to give just a little bit of context and background and just then dive directly to the update, but just our office was established in 2019. Our mission and our goal is to strengthen collaboration, capacity, and partnerships to prevent multiple forms of violence and to promote healing across all communities in LA County. Established in 2019, we have an annual budget of about $14 million. And we are governed by both a county leadership committee and a community partnership council who guides our work and holds us accountable. Next slide, please. I just want to highlight some of our early implementation priorities because I think it's important to hold the Family Assistance Program within this container of the work that we do, because I think we definitely see it benefiting from the other work and resources that we have within the office. So we believe in local place-based work throughout the county. County is large, 10 million residents, many geographies. So our work is really local and place-based, and we are standing up regional violence prevention coalitions in each of the service planning areas that do this work in that led by community members. We are creating an open data portal that will be accessible to community. Data there, we want to be transparent in all that we do. So just in terms of incidents of violence across the board, but also with this program, we will post that data on the data portal. We have a trauma prevention initiative which employs street intervention and hospital-based violence intervention that connects with those most at risk in community using peer specialists, interventionists, peace ambassadors, and that work is going on now across LA County. Again, for FAP, and I'll reference that later. We are standing up a crisis response pilot that's starting in South LA. We are advancing healing-centered and trauma-informed systems change, and we believe an important part of this work, and it's so important that we have hired communication strategists, is to really shift the narrative about violence and trauma and how it occurs and be motivated. Next slide, please. So, as you know, the recommendation was made to transition the work of the Family Assistance Program to the Office of Violence Prevention. We are grateful to DMH for piloting this program, to Miriam in particular, because all along the way she has worked with us and been a true partner and collaborator. So we really want to build a trauma-informed peer approach to provide support services for grieving families and improve efficiency of processes across our systems, our county systems in particular. We are going to build on the best practices that we gleaned from DMH's pilot, and we will continue the coordination across partners, mental health, coroner, sheriff, OIG, COC. We will continue burial assistance to families who lost a loved one due to deputy-involved shooting or death in custody. We are hiring on an in-house team of clinicians, which is unique for an Office of Violence Prevention to have mental health clinicians, but so important for this work. So there are 4 clinician items, 2 that will be housed in the Office of Violence Prevention to respond as Miriam and her team does, but we really also believe it's important to house 2 of those clinicians with the coroner's office to help with system navigation and also eventually, hopefully, more next of kin notifications, right? Building that capacity so that we will continue to work with the coroner as they build that capacity to do that work. And then we will coordinate and leverage the resources of our other healing initiatives and also the crisis response. I want to say here before I go to the next slide, which will outline the timeline, that there are several key components to this model. It builds on all the good work that DMH did, but we were at those meetings when we heard and we heard loud and clear. So I want to highlight some of the differences that are going to be integrated into this new model, and ask for some forgiveness as you see the timeline, because I know how urgent this is, but it takes a minute to build and transition. So we heard loud and clear that peer navigators and peer support, community members and credible messengers should be a part of this model. When county shows up, when there's been an officer-involved shooting, you know, community understandably is leery. And so we need to engage community partners to help with the interface with county systems. And so we really intend to bring in and fund a CBO that will help with that peer navigation. Very important. We heard loud and clear at those meetings that people didn't really know about the services of the Family Assistance Program. It wasn't widely. I know DMH posted it on their website and they tried to share information as widely as possible, but we will be making a big deal when we launch, but we would do a disservice if we made a big deal now when we're not ready. But when we are ready, we plan to saturate all our communities, especially those that we're working in, which are many of the same communities where people have lost loved ones, with the information about the Family Assistance Program. Very, very important. Third difference and third point, or maybe it's not a difference, and Miriam, you'll tell me, but we heard loud and clear that at that moment of crisis, people might be ready. They might not be. We want an open door, ongoing. Whenever you need help, we are there. It won't stop at that moment. It won't stop at the 3 months down the line. It won't stop at 6 months. You need help. You lost a loved one. We will help. We will not put a time limit on you. And I think another important, having it being housed in the Office of Violence Prevention, is we have a very good research and evaluation team headed up. Lead epidemiologist Isabel Sternfeld. She's creating that data portal. You're going to be collecting all the data and analyzing all the data publicly available. And for the purpose, not just constantly responding to these incidents, but to understand what is happening so that we can prevent these incidents from happening going forward. So I think those are the key components of how we see this model going forward. So next slide, timeline. So I want to share with you where we are and where we're going. And in October 2022, 6 months ago, the county allocated ongoing funding for the Family Assistance Program in the Office of Violence Prevention. They allocated $1.5 million. That budget, I wish we had put up a budget slide, I'm sorry that we didn't think about that, but is the 4 clinical positions, right? 2 in the coroner's office, 2 with us. It is a contract to a community-based organization that will help with that peer support and peer navigation. It will contain a budget for burial assistance that is currently in place. And it will also house the ability to really make this widely and share this publicly through printed materials and whatever else we have to do. In February 2023, we requested the staff items, and they got approved. And we have requested the list to begin hiring, including the DMEC positions, the coroner positions, which are still pending. But as Mr. Huntsman referenced earlier, the county process to hire is a slow one, and we're doing the best we can to get those positions on board because we really can't. We are limited in what we are able to do until we get those positions on board. In the interim, though, because we don't want to delay this, we are hiring a consultant to help with the transition of this program. We are working closely with Miriam and DMH, but we need someone to really be the champion, to get the partners together, to have the conversation, to develop the protocols, especially given the new elements that I mentioned. So we're bringing on a consultant that hopefully that contract will go live in July. Hopefully, to the positions as we recruit will happen faster than August, but, we don't know that for sure. So we put an August date there. So we will begin working with the consultant in July. We hope to have staff on board in July and August and really build up some steam to move this forward. And we will continue to work with all the partners involved, including LA Sheriff's Department and the Department of Mental Health and the Coroner's Office and other partners to really set up how this model will work. And then hopefully by December, we will have the contract with CBO partner. And then we will get all the pieces in place and really make sure that we're solid so that we can publicly launch and fully launch in January 2024. And you may say, and community may say, and commissioners, you may say that it's too slow, that it's not fast enough. We are working as fast as we can within the county systems that we are a part of. In the interim, what I really want to share with you too is, because it is not fast enough, is that we continue to provide funding to DMH to cover the burial assistance. That's an important component of this. And our crisis response team will respond to incidents in the interim. So we are working with the CBO now. We have a crisis response team. This is certainly a crisis response incident. So we will do that, and we will continue to be there and support as we can with what we have until we're really able to fully launch in a way that just makes sense and we don't let anybody down. There's a call for help. So thank you very much. That ends my presentation. Free to contact us.
And Erica, if you can turn your camera on and unmute yourself, feel free to begin.
Okay, I just want to do a quick sound check. Can you hear me?
We do, yes.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, commissioners. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to share a bit of information this afternoon related to the Family Assistance Program. My name is Erica Bonilla. I work with the Chief Executive Office. I've been working very closely, with the departments related to this program. They covered a lot of information that I planned to mention, and so I will keep my comments brief and touch upon some of the major funding elements. To step back a little bit, in October of 2021, the board introduced a motion directing various county departments and commissions and organizations, including the Office of Inspector General, the Civilian Oversight Commission, Office of Violence Prevention, and others, to submit a report that indicated where the program should reside. And as mentioned previously, the recommendation included, the recommendation was for this to reside within the Department of Public Health in the Office of Violence Prevention. There was then, the report actually went back in February of 2022, citing what the framework would be under the Office of Violence Prevention. So as mentioned, there was a recommendation for staffing as well as various other expenses, a very minimal amount of funding for various supplies, et cetera. Also funding for contracting with community-based organizations, the funding for the actual burial assistance costs to be able to reimburse families for that portion of it. There was also some funding set aside for an evaluation. There was a subsequent motion in April 2022 that directed the CEO to identify the funding so that the program could be launched and transitioned over through the Office of Violence Prevention. So as part of the 22-23 supplemental budget in October of 2022, the CEO was able to identify the requested amount of 1.5 million in ongoing Assembly Bill 109 funds. And so that funding was set in place at that point in time. In consultation and in conversations with the Department of Public Health, Office of Violence Prevention, we don't understand that at this time there is a need for additional funding. And so we've been told that all of the funding needed for the program is in place and there are no additional unmet needs. That concludes my remarks today. Happy to take any questions you may have.
Thank you. Commissioner questions? Patty, I think you meeting patiently.
Right, well, I don't have a question per se. I might, but I have a great appreciation of this topic, how much families who lost somebody through law enforcement interventions suffered. One of the first topics that we dealt with as a commission. So many families came to our meetings, and we also met with families individually, many families. And it was a period of deep listening to what was going on. And we organized a committee, Family Assistance Committee, that really was informed by the families' testimonies and also by some of the advocates. I remember Youth Justice Coalition coming before us, and other groups came forward, and they were very much in touch with those families. So it was a very emotional period for the beginning of our sessions here, hearing from these families and their advocates. And so we took this on as wanting to really remedy an approach that almost treated these families as pariah. All the systems, the sheriff, all the systems kind of were not open to these folks were outsiders. They were not getting any resources, any help. It was a big lift for this commission, for the community, and for all the departments. And I remember going to the Board of Supervisors with the proposal to create a program that would help with burial costs and would help with trauma-informed counseling, trauma-informed assistance. And at that meeting were the heads of Department of Public Health, Department of Mental Health, coroner was there, LASD, everyone actually came to the table in agreement. All that work that was done, all the information sharing, and all the listening to the testimony of the families. So that's the forerunner of where we are today. And that was 2016, 2017, I believe. And what happened was Department of Mental Health really took on responding. And I really want to give a super appreciation for Miriam Brown, Deputy Director of Mental Health, because there are times when Miriam Brown, Miriam will go. If somebody else can't go, Miriam Brown will go and meet with the families. And her whole approach of the trauma-informed lens is just critical. You know, and now everybody is finally becoming more educated on the complexity of trauma responses. Right. And with the Department of Public Health, what a gift to take a public health perspective on violence. And so the shift that we're seeing now, I think, has so much intelligence to it. Its origins has had a tremendous amount of support, and I'm trusting that all the collaborations will continue as we move forward to really make a difference in the interventions that these families are able to engage in when they are ready. when they are ready. There was a lot about like, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you ask for help? Why didn't you say this at this time? That's not a trauma-informed approach. You have to really understand how trauma, and it doesn't impact everybody the same way. Complex, plus there's complex trauma, which is people has suffered other traumas before these incidents happen. So that's just a little preamble on my part, an appreciation. I'm so glad that our county has an Office of Violence Prevention. That is an advance. That's pretty sophisticated. And I'm so glad that all the partners are still involved from the very beginning, including the Sheriff's Department, including the coroner, because everybody has to be on board. And this may seem like, when you look at this, I mean, these are a lot of families for what we're talking about, but when you think of all the, what do we have? 10 million people in the county. People may think, well, isn't that a niche for that group? It's not a niche. It's significant. How we treat these families will also be indicative of how we treat everybody else in our county who is in need of different kinds of assistance and support. So I just want to say thank you that we've gotten here. It looks like we're going to have funding. It's going to continue. I'm sure there'll be, bumps in the road. We will always be here as a support and as a partner, along with the OIG and the other groups. So thank you to Miriam. Thank you to Andrea, your teams. And thank you for this commission for just sticking with this throughout the last, six and a half years.
Thank you.
Not a question, it was my comment.
Anyone else? Well, this is a real source of pride for us, and I'm happy family assistance program is becoming more permanent and more thought out. So to our speakers, really thank you for letting us know what's going on. We appreciate it. We have a brief report regarding the presence of deputies in hospitals or health facilities. And Luis, I think you're going to just give us a rundown of the report before we turn to Sheriff Luna.
Thank you for allowing me to provide an issue of deputies in health facilities. Commission first heard of this issue at the June 2021 Commission meeting when the Sheriff's Department Countywide Services Division Captain Berta Steinbrenner shared historical incidents which prompted the need for security in the hospitals. Commission then heard from Frontline Wellness Executive Director Mark Anthony Clayton Johnson and Los Angeles County Olive View Medical Center's Dr. Hannah Janeway about the negative impact of deputies in the care setting. In September of 2021, the Commission agreed that the staff would request information, and a staff report was presented at the January 2022 Commission meeting. The Commission also heard from Harbor UCLA Medical Center's Chief Operating Officer, Azar Katan, and UCLA Law Professor, Sunita Patel. At that time, staff were directed to monitor the issue. The staff report attached to today's meeting agenda is an update to the issue. The report highlights the data that was provided by the Sheriff's Department about crimes, arrests, and complaints in hospitals. The Sheriff's Department also proposed some changes that could improve security at the contracted hospitals. There is a lot of information, but if commissioners have any questions on it, we can take note and follow up accordingly. If the Commission requests today, staff will continue to request information from the Sheriff's Department and the Department of Health Services and monitor the issue.
Thank you. Any questions? I know the hour is getting late, so we're going to have a report from Sheriff Luna, who is here. Sheriff, welcome. We appreciate you being here. And then we'll take a vote on Hans's pending motion, and then we will take general public comment. But Sheriff, I'm going to give the floor to you. I will say we had a robust and hard-hitting discussion of the Sheriff's Department's internal investigation, the shooting of Guardado. think I speak for the commission when I say just deep concerns about the professionalism, trustworthiness, the objectivity, and the integrity of the investigation when we hear that almost 3 years after that shooting in which the deputy has been indicted federally, and it's been widely reported that he is a member of a deputy gang. We heard that no one from the sheriff's department has asked or investigated that issue at all. And of course, as I said in my letter, the detectives who conducted the investigation claimed the Fifth Amendment during a public inquest. The issue is such a concern. We even had a representative from Councilman Hugo Sota Martinez's office who raised concerns about the investigation, and numerous members of the public who were frankly, I think, surprised that the district attorney would accept the conclusions given the gaping holes in the investigation. But this is really your time to discuss anything that you want to. We are really grateful to have you here, to have your engagement, and to talk about your struggles as our sheriff.
Good afternoon to everybody. I apologize for being late. I was participating in a California Highway Patrol press conference on street takeovers and street racing, along with the Los Angeles Police Department and parents who had lost their children due to that type of activity. I think you heard from Assistant Sheriff Holly Francisco earlier on the issue that you bring forward. Specifically for the case you're talking about, like many others, as I've come into the department, there are things that we are looking at, things that we are assessing, reanalyzing, that, just to put it bluntly, I'm not satisfied with. And I think for the command level or executives that we've put in place, they understand the expectations are very clear that in some senses we can't go backwards, although we look at items from the past and see if there's any corrections that that can be made. So when you talk, for example, about the issue of the Fifth Amendment, obviously that sounds extremely alarming and troubling. So we have to figure out the best we can what happened back then, never forget about it, but now as we move forward, how do we operate in an environment where that will not happen again, that is not acceptable. It's not the way we're going to move forward. And I think you heard a lot of that from the assistant sheriff, as you would from on any topic, whether we're dealing with custody issues, patrol issues, investigative issues, or the other vast responsibilities that we have as a sheriff's department. And as I reported the last 2 times that I've been here, that we are trying to change the tone. I'm trying to shift this large aircraft carrier the best that we can, and I have no doubt it'll get there. But I think all of you know, and I'm going to be here to answer any questions, that I was challenged from day one, even before I was elected, even as I got elected, that a so-called quote unquote outsider couldn't come into this culture and change it. Well, change doesn't happen overnight, and it's not going to. But I have the commitment of the people that I've placed around me that are learning their jobs as well, their new jobs as well, to make that change with very clear expectations, community expectations of us as we move forward, to make those long-lasting cultural changes that I think we all know and you hear about constantly in your meetings have to occur.
Questions? Rob, can you talk into the microphone so everyone can hear what you say?
All right. Thank you for being here, Sheriff Luna. And you weren't here earlier, but I did ask Assistant Sheriff Francisco sort of the when question, and let me just go back and repeat it because I'd like very much to get your response to it. But on March 3rd of this year, the Oversight Commission adopted and forwarded to you a set of recommendations designed to, and which if adopted and enforced, we believe will eliminate deputy gangs within the Sheriff's Department. First and foremost, I think I said, and I continue to believe, is the prompt adoption of recommendations 1B and 1C, which would prohibit joining and or participating in deputy gangs, deputy law enforcement gangs as defined by the state statute, and deputy cliques. And we specifically define deputy cliques to include, among other things, the banditos, the executioners, and we define the term what means by deputy cliques. I could read it to you. I'm sure you've seen it. So we think we've been fairly patient, and I know you've got a lot on your plate, believe me. But we'd like to see some action here, some leadership, which would be to either adopt particularly those two recommendations now, so at least it's possible to investigate and potentially discipline deputies who continue to participate or be members in going forward into deputy cliques and deputy gangs. And frankly, leaving aside the one recommendation that I know has created some controversy, at least in some of the contract cities, and that's the recommendation on the 5-year rotation policy. Leave that aside, that probably needs some further discussion. But I think those two recommendations I mentioned, 1B and 1C, and frankly, probably all other 26 recommendations other than the rotation one, I just don't see why they can't go forward, be adopted, so you can start through Internal Affairs Bureau and the like to take action to investigate and discipline deputies who continue to either participate or join in deputy cliques / deputy gangs. So I wonder where that is basically and when we're going to see some action.
Thank you for the question. We continue to work towards a lot of these. I'm going to give you some examples. So regarding the policy, Eileen Decker, who sits to my right, is currently working on it, has been working on it, continues to work on it. Our goal is in the next several weeks to have something in writing to a lot of the other stakeholders that would have to look through it. Because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that the policy is solid, that it is effective in what we have to do. It's going to take, it has taken some work. And I got to compliment Eileen. I think most of you know, because I said it publicly, even though I appreciate my county partners, the CEO, in hiring Eileen, it only took 3 months. And right now she's trying to figure out how to get the staff to support her. So this policy, she's actually doing it on her own as we're waiting for additional staff to be hired. That's happening a little slower than I would like. I'm impatient, as I stated last time, and the goal is to get there. If any of you heard my presentation to the Board of Supervisors about a week and a half ago, in my about 3 to 4 minute presentation, I actually asked for several additional captain positions to move forward and try to assign a second captain to some of the stations that all of you have identified in your recommendations. That being said, although we're waiting for a budget item to be approved by our supervisors, I just replaced the captain at the East Los Angeles station. Out of my own hide, I'm going to find a captain somewhere, and I'm going to place a second captain at the East LA station, not waiting for supervisor approval from that regards. So that's a work in progress. The other captains we're working towards. A lot of the other recommendations regarding making sure that we're getting in front of our employees, specifically our upper command staff. I have every class that's about to graduate or has graduated from the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department Academy class, I personally go talk to them within the week prior to graduating and give them my expectations. Part of those expectations, there is a good, very healthy discussion on things like tattoos, deputy gang issue. And then when I gave my expectation presentation to all the captains and above, not too long ago, the same was done there, and I will continue to do those. So we have not been sitting idle. There is a lot of work to be done. I respect and understand your impatience, meaning the commission's impatience, but we're going to get there. And I will challenge anyone that in the last several months, I think all of us, including yourselves, have seen more progress than we've seen in the last at least 4 years. The fact that I'm sitting here speaking with you and willing to take the questions is progress. I know we need to do a lot more. I'm willing and ready, and that as we move forward. My partner here wants to add to it, please.
Thank you, Sheriff. Commissioner Bonner, and the sheriff wouldn't know this because I sent an email this morning requesting a meeting with the ad hoc group to go over a draft policy. I'm still getting internal feedback on that to be sure we have a draft worthy of a conversation. And I want to be sure I get the details correct. In addition, I've asked County Council for some feedback. Despite waiting for some feedback, I'm not holding up. I want to engage the COC, the IG's office, labor, all of those different partners that we need feedback from to put together the feedback on the draft to have something that can then be more broadly distributed.
And I'm sorry, if you want to respond to that, you could. I just wanted to make another comment, though.
Go ahead, Sheriff.
Thank you, Your Honor. I just wanted to add this on there, and it not so much involves gangs, but one can argue it does, that Eileen has been working extremely hard. Just to give you an example, the last several weeks, we had a whole host of federal monitors coming in and other people from the Department of Justice from the federal government who were here with us looking at reports, listening to us, and basically, as I'm coming into this very important job, is telling us how miserably we were failing before. So there's a lot of work being done. There's a lot of work to get us back in line with a lot of things that we fell behind on. And with the 5 consent decrees that we have, the settlement agreements, those are very challenging in themselves. So I'm just letting you know there's a lot going on. There's a lot of work being done. And I don't even want to get into all the custody settlement agreements that we have and the work being done there to improve the conditions that are very well documented.
I think we all appreciate that there are a lot of things going on, but there are a lot of things going on. I've noticed that people lose focus. One of the things that you were elected to do was to get rid of deputy gangs in the sheriff's department, and I know you mean it when you said that, but that takes policy. That takes then, where you can implement and enforce policy, you have to have policy. So anyway, if there's anything at all that I or any other member of the commission can do to accelerate this process, assist Ms. Decker in that regard, we are here. But there is a sense of urgency to boldly move out so that everybody in the department knows that the days of deputy cliques, deputy gangs are over in the department. That's not clear yet, and it won't be clear until you forcefully say that and adopt policy that speaks loudly that the violation of that policy can result in termination of a deputy. So it's needed. by the way, that's the first step. You have to enforce policy. There are other things that you are doing already, which I applaud. With respect to the East LA station and the fact that you've recognized some stations might need a backup captain because they have historic problems with deputy gangs. So applaud what you're doing, but just need to forward as quickly as can be done with an appropriate consultative process with stakeholders, but ultimately, you know, you're the one that's accountable at the end of the day here, and it's none of those stakeholders. It's not even, you know, so anyway, again, let me just, I'm repeating myself, but if there's anything whatsoever that the commission can do to assist this process forward, please, please call on us. Thank you.
And I don't disagree with anything you said, and just keep on pushing. I don't mind you pushing, all of you. That's what we're here for. We're going to continue. We're not going to stop until we do. I made it very clear that the deputy gang clique, whatever you want to call them, is unacceptable. As a matter of fact, the man sitting to my left has made it public, as you well are aware, that he's conducting an investigation. I put out an order today to all of my employees. You shall show up and you shall cooperate. And again, that's something that we haven't seen before. So that should give everyone a very strong message, specifically inside the Sheriff's Department, that we're not messing around with this.
I do just want to note the great value of your presence here and the great value of Eileen Decker's presence. I think we heard vocalized even in public comment, the trust that Eileen has engendered in her advent at the department and her other work. But I do just also want to note the input that the community gave to this commission at our most recent community meeting in Palmdale, and the repeated references in the public comment and in the testimony from family impacts there about deputy gangs and the repeated and continuing problem of retaliation and the shadow of intimidation that it casts over their lives and over their children and over their families and over their relationships in the community. And the absence of sheriff's local presence at that community meeting was noted, and the future community meetings that this commission hopes to have, including in Compton next month. We hope to have presence by you if possible, by Ms. Decker if possible, and that presence, especially with so many things going on, especially with the impatience that you have heard from this commission and that you, I think, join in expressing, that presence is all the more important amidst the hopefulness and the impatience that this commission and the community is experiencing about the problem.
Sheriff. I have a motion. The motion, can you just restate it and we'll take a vote on it? You can just summarize. It doesn't have to be.
The motion was to approve the letter on behalf of the commission regarding the two incidents, one preceding this sheriff from October of 2022, one from April of 2023, involving deputies' intrusion into homes, failure to heed warnings and messages from the residents. In the latter case, hauling a sleeping resident out of 4 a.m. unclothed and refusing the opportunity to put clothes on before bringing them inside, and the lack of trust that this engenders in the community that constitutional policing policies are being followed, and to request any training policies or other practices from the department that relate to these two incidents and how they are out of policy.
Okay. Take the vote.
Copying the motion is phrased because it assumes certain facts that I just don't know exactly what happened with respect to these two incidents. Hans knows a lot more than I do apparently, but I've just first heard of these two incidents, and I don't know whether they were out of policy or not. That's the question. They should be appropriately, I think, sounds like both of them should be appropriately investigated at least at the Internal Affairs Bureau level. I don't know what it's ICIB here. It's probably just Internal Affairs Bureau. They probably should be investigated. I'd support a motion that, they be investigated, and then we always have this problem. I mean, we want to hear about what the results of the investigation are, and for some reason they can be shared with the IG because he has an MOU, and we don't have an MOU with the Sheriff's Department, and that creates some issues. But I would support maybe it's a friendly amendment to call on the Sheriff's Department to investigate both those incidents and to report back to us. And if they come back and say we've investigated, but we can't report back, well, then we'll have to address that problem. But
Mr. Bonner, you exactly summarized the spirit and the language of the letter. So it is reflected therein. That request.
I just put Hans on the spot. He did the best he could to summarize, but I think that's exactly right. So can we have a vote?
For the question.
Yes, do we need to take public comment first? Oh, wait.
No, we already did.
Yeah, we did.
Okay,
Public comment.
so take a vote on Commissioner Johnson's motion. Chair Kennedy?
Yes.
Vice Chair Hicks?
Yes.
Commissioner Bonner?
Just clarified, yes.
Commissioner Garcia?
Yes.
Commissioner Giggins?
Yes.
Commissioner Harris?
Yes.
Commissioner Johnson?
Yes.
The motion carries. I'll turn it over to you, Commissioner.
Thank you. I think it is now time for general public comment.
Okay, so first person for public comment is Michelle Infante, followed by Vanessa Perez.
Just a point of order, Mr. Chair. I know we're want to finish, but there is a point of order, and I have to address this to our acting executive director. But I believe before we have final public comment, we're supposed to nominate a chair and a vice chair this meeting. Could I ask Danielle to respond to that?
Thank you, Commissioner Bonner. It's next month in June where we do the nominations, and then we hold the elections at our annual meeting, which is in July.
Okay, I understand. I misread that. I'm sorry, Mr. Chair. Let's proceed with public comment.
I misread it exactly the same way, Rob. So thanks for clarifying for everybody. Michelle?
Good afternoon. This comment is to Sheriff Luna. You sent here a representative of your department, and it turns out that they are exactly the culture and problematic deputies that you have. You sent someone here that told half-truths about our discussion regarding your deputies taking the Fifth and the Guardado case. And apparently, half the truths were good to give us some fluff regarding some work that your department may have done, but then Max Huntsman had to swoop in and clean it up and tell us the other half that wasn't very good. And so in the future, when you send someone, don't send someone who says it's okay or that allows your department the room to not come here and tell the truth and be deceiving to the people that are here. It's unbelievable that you would send somebody who makes it sound like it's okay if someone takes the Fifth and it's not problematic on an investigation report. Investigation reports are not full, they're not complete, they're not smoothly done. If someone is taking the Fifth, how do we know what they're telling on an investigation report regarding that case to begin with? So to have somebody come here and make it seem like it's okay with what your department is doing, and then Max has to come in and clean it up, swoop in and tell us the parts that you're not telling us, that's not a good look for your department. Families need to hear the truth, and I'm glad, I said earlier, I'm glad that a lot of families are not here because it would be trauma to them for someone to come in here and say that investigation reports and taking the Fifth, well, the investigation reports are smoothly. If you're not telling the truth and you don't want to incriminate yourself, what's really being written down in an investigation report? So the next time you send a representative, please send someone who's much more informed and who's willing to tell the truth about your department.
My name is Vanessa. I'm Joseph's mom. How do you expect there to be trust with your sheriffs when the same deputies that have already created so much chaos and destroyed families are still currently working as deputies? Just because you transfer the deputy doesn't mean the problem is gone. The deputy, Paul Sedana, that beat my son is still a school resource officer at Nogales High School with my daughter. I mean, are these deputies untouchable? Is that the message you're sending? Is it that you don't have the, or is it just you don't have the real power to do anything? Or is it that you just don't care to Mr. Robert Luna? Moving forward, the OIG's office called me, Ms. Candace Wong. She said my son's case was going to be a priority. She said she then made 2 appointments and canceled both. I haven't heard from her since. Is this the way you run your office, Max Huntsman? Everyone up here speaks of accountability. Well, I want to know, what exactly does accountability look like to all of you guys? Because I think one of us has got it wrong. I honestly believe if I had said nothing at all, I would have got the same exact results that I do today, and that's nothing. So tell me, what does accountability look like if every deputy I mentioned is still getting paid with no discipline? Then I'm going to be the one to say, no accountability has taken place. Get these deputies that are known for prior excessive forces and fire them. Let them be the examples of what not to do. And just then, maybe the community will start to believe in you, Sheriff Robert Luna. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have a couple of speakers signed up online. Helen Jones, a request has been sent for you to unmute yourself. Then we'll hear from MJ King and Christina Vasquez. Please go ahead, Helen.
Thank you. Yes, we know so many of these stations are filled with deputy gangs, and we really don't understand why these stations haven't been emptied out, restarted with different deputies in there, because you got these same deputies that have been together for years. They got relationships where they done so much misconduct together. They done so much corruption together. So how are these deputies allowed to stay together with each other? And just listening to the family assistance program, listening and hearing about the families, the representatives have came here and talk about the families are scared to be for their information to even be involved with the sheriff department, period. That's just sad. That should just really let y'all know how bad it is in the sheriff department and how this really need to be turned around. I even heard about the deputies, how about y'all hiring. There's so many seats that's missing because y'all don't have enough deputies to fill this. That's even sad that people don't even want to be a sheriff. So that should even let y'all know how bad the sheriff department is run too. Sheriff Luna, you said you will be getting rid of these gangs. That's not hard to do because y'all know who the gang members is. Y'all look at that 300 deputy list that when McDonald was trying to put out, that y'all made sure that the public, that we can't find out who these deputies are, what their names are, until you change that, and until you change these deaths that's hidden right now, that's being covered up by the county coroner with the sheriff department. Until we get that transparency, nobody would never trust the sheriff department. Change that. Help with these deaths. Bring these investigations back to light, because these families are suffering and it shouldn't be like that.
Thank you, Helen. And next is MJ King. Please go ahead.
Thanks. I'd like to remind you all that we wouldn't need a family assistance program if we prevented LASD from harming our communities in the first place. So let's just stop LASD. I've asked this before, but I'll ask it again now. What can this commission do to protect families from harassment by LASD? And how can we disqualify gang members from working in law enforcement? Regarding deputies in health facilities, in the names of Nicolas Burgos and Ruben Herrera, take LASD out of health facilities. You know that LASD only escalates situations and they have no place in health facilities. Since Sheriff Luna missed it, I'll reiterate my concern for Eileen Decker's appointment to the Constitutional Policing Office when she spent years rubber stamping LAPD misconduct. It sounds a lot like more of the same. This doesn't instill confidence in the community. And as I shared at the BOS budget meeting, additional captains at East LA Station or others sounds like a waste of tax dollars when your own undersheriff wears a deputy gang tattoo that you claim is a station tattoo. It sounds a lot like more of the same. Stop wasting our tax dollars. Last, I want to acknowledge timeliness. Last meeting, a community member whose son experienced harm by LASD and MCJ and whose daughter is experiencing harm in LASD by LASD in schools traveled all the way to participate but was cut off and asked to travel to the next meeting to complete her public comment. I know you have a lot of LASD misconduct to cover, but please don't overpack your schedule. It's unnecessary added trauma to our impacted community members. And I would just like all of those who did travel to participate, thank you so much for coming and sharing your voice. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you, MJ. And next is Christina Vasquez. Christina, please acknowledge the unmute request. Go ahead.
Christina Vasquez, wife of Marco Vasquez, killed by the Pico Sheriff's Department on October 6, 2019. I just wanted to give a comment regarding the family assistance program. I know that the speaker stated there was some reluctancy from families to join in when it came into the therapy portion of it. And what I didn't know, I have private insurance, so I went into therapy right away. And it had taken some time for my husband's case to move along. And last year, when we were going through the discovery process, I was notified by my therapist that they had subpoenaed my therapy notes. And I was never aware that would be something that could be taken. So in that part, the client confidentiality is not protected. And I feel like that is why a lot of people are very reluctant to go into therapy, because just knowing that that could be taken, something very private, the one safe space that I had was now taken from me when I had been violated in so many other ways. So in case none of you were aware, just to bring awareness to that, because had I known, I would not have participated in therapy, knowing that such private parts of my life could be exposed publicly on the stand. So I just wanted to notate that is potentially why a lot of people are afraid, and we are not trusting in this system at all, because it has failed us time and time again and continues to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. And next we'll hear from Tamra. Please go ahead, Tamra.
Okay.
Yes, I hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay. Power and strength to the families impacted by sheriff murder and continue to be harassed. John Horton, Jelani Lovett, Anthony Vargas, Paul Ray, Andreas Guardado, Dijon Kizzy, Fred Williams, AJ Weber, Ryan Twyman, and too many more. It's really concerning and problematic how much time law enforcement and their partners has unlimited time in the COC meetings, yet the families and the public are continually cut short our time on these meetings. As far as the family assistance program, unfortunately, it's necessary. It should be prevented. But the problem with that is it's not community-based. The family assistance program should be community-based only, because families experiencing sheriff violence shouldn't have to deal with the same departments that are they're experiencing violence from. So if there is going to be community-based, a family assistance program, it should be community-based by from Black and brown communities that are already organizations that are doing the work. But we shouldn't need these in the first place. We need to prevent the families being impacted by sheriff violence to begin with. More captains is not going to eradicate sheriff gangs, Sheriff Luna. I was on the Board of Supervisors meeting, and that will not fix the problem. Okay, there's a deep-seated problem that's been going on well over 50 years. There's RAND reports, there's Loyola University reports. We need to eradicate the department and put resources in our community. We want sheriff deputies out of hospitals and out of schools. They don't make us feel safe. People are being killed in these areas of hospitals, schools, in our communities. And just for example, we voted on Measure J, and those for mental health services and housing services, we voted on it, and those services still have not been allocated. So we need.
Thank you, and we did hear your full comment. We have two speakers remaining, Andres Kwan and Adriana Quinones. Please go ahead, Andres.
Andres Kwan, ACLU. First off, Sheriff Luna, the bar that Villanueva set with its illegal conduct and obstruction of oversight is an extremely low bar. So would advise you against comparing yourself to Villanueva. That means absolutely nothing. I ran out of time earlier, and I wanted to emphasize how disturbed we are with the DA's application of his responsibility, that the DA didn't independently investigate the gang allegations, and also the criminal allegations of LAC's cover-up, not just about destroying video footage, but the totality of it all, the security hold, the detectives pleading the fifth, and so on. This is despite the Board of Supervisors' motion on July 27, 2021, almost 2 years ago, requesting that the DA investigate all criminal conduct by LAC. The DA should be proactively investigating LAC shootings outside jurisdiction of the California DOJ, especially where there are deputy gang allegations, instead of just leaving it to the very agency that did the shooting to investigate itself. DAs are leading shooting investigations in other counties, so why can't the DA do that here in LA? The police cannot police itself, and on this note, LAC must fully comply with SB 421 with respect to personnel involved with Andres Guardado's shooting and investigation. No excuses. Lastly, we need to lift up LAC's continued harassment from retaliation against grieving families, many of whom have been daring to exercise their First Amendment rights. That same July 27, 2021 board motion was in the context of our work to stop LAC's harassment of families. As our Check the Sheriff report in 2021 and our forum with Supervisor Solis and Mitchell described in detail, family after family has experienced eerily similar patterns of harassment at the hands of deputies, often the very deputies who killed their loved ones. Deputies slowly driving by or parking in front of families' homes, workplaces, memorial sites, damaging items at memorial sites, taunting them, etc. And it goes on and on. With that context, going back to the board's July 2021 motion, the board requested LAC adopt policies prohibiting LAC's harassment of families. Yet to this day, LAC has not done so. The COC and the board should ensure once and for all LAC's immediate adoption and adherence to policies that stop and prevent the harassment of families.
Thank you. That does conclude your time. And Adriana Quinones, please go ahead.
Good afternoon, Sheriff Luna. My name is Adriana Quinones, a resident of Hacienda Heights, and I'm glad that you were able to make it to this meeting. First of all, you ran on making sure that this department would have transparency and accountability. However, you have not had a community meeting, a town hall. I would like to see that. I know the former sheriff used to have town halls, and they were very helpful as communities' voices were heard. What I also want to make you aware is that the industry sheriff station, it's outstanding. There is a deputy by the name of Jose Ruano, who works very closely with our community. He knows what it takes to be a good deputy. Your department should be modeling after what he does. He actually goes out to the community, listens, and does things that no other deputy sheriff does. He actually goes to our neighborhood watch meetings. I'm working closely with him to organize neighborhood watch block by block. And it doesn't matter what day or what time the meetings are held. He makes sure that he works his schedule around the needs of the community. That's a type of model we need in our communities. Now, I'm tired of hearing all the bad things about the sheriffs, because when good things happen, nobody talks about it. But let me tell you, in our community, we respect our law enforcement because they do work closely with us, but we also hold each other accountable. The community members, if my son or my daughter does something wrong, I'm going to hold my daughter or my son accountable. No excuses. I'm tired of the excuses that we make for our kids. Let's own it. Thank you.
Thank you. And that does conclude all of the public comment, Chair Kennedy, so I will turn it back to you now.
Okay, it looks like we're concluding our meeting.
Sorry.
Sheriff, I appreciate you being here. I do want to echo Commissioner Bonner's comments. The policy that we provided, the anti-gang policy, is one that was not quickly or thoughtlessly drafted. We consulted some of the best law firms in America and First Amendment specialists and debated the issues literally for months before submitting that policy. So I really hope the Sheriff's Department will pass our anti-gang policy, because that seems like the first step. Of course, the implementation is another. We will be having our next regularly scheduled meeting at the Dollar Hyde Community Center in Compton, not here. And we're also going to have a town hall at the Florence Library. Our regular meeting is June 15th, 2023, and our town hall is Saturday, June 24th. We've been doing Saturday meetings, town halls, for a while now, precisely to address one of the callers or one of the people's comments about being accessible for working people. So those would be two opportunities to weigh in. I really appreciate all the community participation we had today. And Eileen and Sheriff Luna, thank you so much for at least attending part of the meeting so that you can hear how stressed out many people are. Thank you. We're adjourned.